Chapter 1097. During the first years of the Dark Portal, rapid travel through teleportation portals was something unimaginable to most people. With the development of magical technology, directional teleportation portals had been greatly improved in the past 20 years. During the First Alliance Conference, the kings of the various countries had taken ships and carriages to rush to the conference. Now teleportation portals were all in place. Those who could become the rulers of a country all had to deal with a myriad of issues. As long as it was safe, no one would have the time to waste on the road. In Teldrassil, Tyron's trusted aide Melland was still feeling uneasy. I wonder if the kings of the various countries will give us the cold shoulder now that we've joined the alliance? In fact, the Nature faction had the same worries. Fandral Staghelm even publicly expressed that Tyron's actions were akin to being cold-shouldered. However, the Night Elves were more inclined towards the alliance. After all, on one side was a pleasant-looking fellow, while on the other side was either Bonehead or the green-skinned beastman who had killed their demigod Cenarius. However, no matter how they thought about it, it was better to actually pay them a visit. I won't. Tyron smiled gently. Yes, Your Excellency High Priest, has anything happened recently? I feel like you're in a good mood and you're glowing. Is that so? You must be imagining things. Tyron turned her head away, blushing. Time's up. Stepping through the teleportation portal that was opened by the Dalaran wizard who was sent ahead of time, the Night Elves only felt a sense of dizziness. They had not experienced the feeling of space deviation ever since they exiled their compatriots, the Blood Elves who now called themselves Sindorii. It was a very short feeling, lasting only a few seconds. By the time they came back to their senses, they were already in a wide passageway that wasn't too long. The portal was less than 10 meters away. Sentinels, puff out your chests. Melon's idea was to display the might of the Night Elves. Unexpectedly, as soon as they stepped out, a female figure in a blue and white wizard robe quickly walked up to them. Sister Tyrande, we meet again. Her tone was calm, but her actions were passionate. Under the gaze of Melland and the Sentinels, the crowned Queen Jaina rushed up and hugged Tyrande. Her actions were extremely intimate, as if they were sisters who had been separated for many years. You're the queen. Pay attention to your image. Although she said it was a reminder, Tyrande's tone was as if she was doting on her own sister. Melon was shocked. She hadn't seen the two of them being so intimate the last time they worked together to kill Arkharon on Mount Hyjal. What the hell happened? Sister, sit in my carriage. Jaina pointed at her royal carriage. Then I'll have to trouble you, sister. Tyrande smiled gently and waved at Melanie, motioning for them to follow her. She then boarded the carriage without hesitation. After all, the mana consumption of the teleportation portal depended on the size and weight of the object being transported. Tyrande did not bring her famous white tiger with her, so she could only rely on the Alliance to provide transportation. With Kurdalas, the queen of the earliest member of the Alliance, leading the way, it was the best way for the Night Elves to integrate into the Alliance. Along the way, Tyrande and Jaina chatted happily in the carriage. Melland and the other sentinels were filled with curiosity. As soon as they arrived at the newly built Lordaeron Palace, they bumped into the Queen of Sindorii, Sylvanas, and the Queen of Alterac, Ilicia. Without any formal greetings, Ilicia came up and gave Tyrande a warm hug. Sister, welcome to the Lordaeron continent. After the meeting, you can come to my South Sea city if you have time. Sylvanas came up and gave her a hug as well. Sister, we meet again. Sylvanas' tone was slightly calmer, but everyone could see that she was friendly towards Tyrande. Elves of two different skin colors, two leaders hugging each other. To the Night Elves who had been isolated for thousands of years, this was a historic moment. Some of the older Night Elf sentries felt their noses tingle. The two elves were ultimately of the same origin. It was purely a difference in ideology that caused them to split. Who would have thought that after the ancient war 10,000 years ago, the Night Elves and Blood Elves would fight side by side again? Compared to Jaina and Ilicia's enthusiasm, Sylvanas was more reserved. She and Tyrande had another topic in common, shooting. Tyrande was a priestess and archer. She was also very skilled in archery. The two strongest archers of this era chatted as they walked side by side. The two queens in front were even more affectionate. Ilicia and Jaina were holding hands as they walked as if they were shopping. Behind them, Melanie and the sentries were dumbfounded. As if they had arranged to meet, Duque had arrived with the Windrunner sisters. Duque gestured elegantly. Turn welcome to Lord Darren. Actually, you've already met the 3 Windrunner sisters. But please allow me to formally introduce you. Aurelia and Sasha are the leaders of the newly formed organization, Silver Dawn. Doesn't it sound fake? There's no other way. This is an official meeting. Even though they've already met each other sincerely and reached a consensus, they had no choice but to introduce each other in public. Aurelia held Tyrand's hands and said elegantly, "Welcome, Sister Tyrand. Silver Dawn is a civil organization with the High Elves as its core. Its goal is to fight against the Scourge. However, we are directly under the command of the Alliance. If you have any missions against the Scourge, please call us sisters. We'll definitely have many opportunities to interact." Tyrand looked at Duque. Just as she was about to say something, a rough and strong voice suddenly sounded. "Don't mix with the women. Come and drink with me. This time we'll drink you until you're unconscious and get the good stuff out of your stomach." The 2 short wintermelons seemed to have rolled over, directly carrying the dumbfounded Duke up and ran. Tyrand gaped. "That's the Dwarven King of Ironforge, Magni Bronzebeard, and his 3rd brother, Bulang," Aurelia replied. "Don't mind those stinky men. We're having a party tonight. Remember to come." Sasha, who was the most active, whispered into Tyrand's ears. While official negotiations were important when it came to interactions between nations, personal relationships were also important. If one attended the meeting but did not even have a private conversation, then the visit would undoubtedly be a failure. The first and second day were all given to the kings to chat in private. It was obvious that Tyrand was not excluded from the Alliance's circle. Chapter 1098. On the first of the day, Tyrand was busy greeting the leaders of the various countries. Thanks to the battle at Mount Hyjal and her relationship with Durin, they were all on good terms. Of course, the final victor would still be the private gathering at night. At 10 at night, Tyrand arrived at the guest house of Sindorii under the protection of sentries. Along the way, not only were there sentries every few steps, but there were also teams of elite guards patrolling the area. There was also a large 3-dimensional protective magic formation set up by the Arcanists of Sindorii. The security was so tight that it left one speechless. Looking at the solemn and nervous expressions of the guards, Melon subconsciously thought that they were about to hold an important meeting that concerned the survival of the world. Seeing how relaxed High Priestess Tyrand looked, holding a thin bag in her left hand and humming a song as she went to the meeting, Melon finally couldn't hold it in anymore. "Sister, is it really okay to be so casual?" As a member of the Elune Sisterhood, this was how they addressed the older and higher priestesses. Tyrand smiled. "Sister, it's fine. I'm really just going to make friends. The tight security is just a trick to fool outsiders." "Really?" Tyrand's casual tone didn't match the solemn atmosphere at all. Under the guidance of the leader of the Blood Elf Paladins, Liadeline, Tyrand and the others finally arrived at the basement of the guest house. In such a secluded place? Could it be a trap? Melon couldn't help but gulp. Just what kind of battle of words was waiting for him in front of him? At the entrance, the stern-faced female guards opened the door. The heavy door creaked open. Suddenly, an unimaginable wave of voices came rushing at them. "Catch her. Don't let her get away." The voice giggled. "Hoo-hoo. You sisters are bullying me." The female voice sounded aggrieved. "Jaina, don't use magic." Someone complained. Then Sasha, "Put away your rubber arrows first." Someone protested. Melon recognized every voice. But Melon didn't dare to confirm it. In the next second, a slender figure in disheveled clothes rushed through the tall opaque entrance and rushed to the door. Melander's jaw dropped. This was the famous master of Theramore, Queen Jaina Proudmoore of Kul Tiras. The problem was that Jaina was wearing a silver bra, a translucent light blue nightgown and a pair of silver briefs. "Sister Tyrand, come quickly." The Windrunner sisters were bullying him. "Let's do 3 against 3. Jaina grabbed Tyrand's hand anxiously. In the blink of an eye, a white pillow flew across the air and hit Jaina's head. Jaina immediately let out a whimper that sounded like a small animal. Woo! Then the stitches on the pillow seemed to loosen, and the snow-white velvet inside flew out in all directions. "Sure. I will join the battle." Tyron smiled as she took off her clothes, revealing a body that Melanie could not help but think was perfect no matter how many times she looked at it. She then put on a white nightgown. Tyron, who had always looked holy and noble, turned to look at her confidant with a reproachful expression. "What are you looking at? Have you never seen a slumber party or a pillow fight before?" Melander was stunned. "Sister, this is a custom passed down from the humans." Tyron chuckled as she threw a pillow back at Melander. This time it was Sasha who hugged her head and whimpered. It was hard to describe Melander's current embarrassment. But this was probably a good thing. "Sister, have fun," Melander said almost subconsciously. "Yes, I will. Come and get me when the sun rises." With that, Tyron threw another pillow that could twist and turn at Savannah's, who was dodging at high speed. The heavy door slowly closed. Melander stood there in a daze as if he had just seen a new world. After a long while he asked Riadaline, "Do all the queens of the Alliance like to play like this?" Riadaline put her hands on her hips and sighed. "Of course not. This is a small circle that you don't know about. Poor Queen Kalia couldn't get in even after waiting for 20 years. Melander was confused. Regardless, Melander still felt happy for Tyrant. As someone close to her, she knew how Tyrant had lived for the past 10,000 years. Politically, she had to exile her fellow High Elves and face Fandrel's provocations. Privately, she had rejected the Stormrage brothers because of that incident. Although Tyrant's face was always filled with warmth and kindness, she had never been happy on the inside. It had been a long time since she had seen her happy. What happened to Tyrant? Why did she suddenly change after a trip to the gushing spring lake? What she didn't know was that Duque, the key person in this matter, was about to vomit. C. I should never have taught the method of distilling liquor to those damn dwarves. The drunken Duque looked at the corpses of the 4 dwarves in the hall of the Steel Stove Castle State Guest House. Magni, Kudrin, Jerban, and Bulang. Duque was furious. His boss was drunk, so someone had to clean up the mess. The guards of the Steel Stove Castle came in and dragged their boss away as if they were used to it. On Duque's side, a maid came to his rescue. "Master. According to you, you're asking for it." Vanessa spat out her poisonous tongue. "Ugh, send me back to the Storm State Guest House. Aurelia and the others are having a pajama party." Vanessa purposely provoked Duque. Duque imagined it. It was a scene that could reach the level of killing a virgin. But not now. That bastard Magni saw that he couldn't win with just one type of wine, so he mixed it with another. In the end, even if Duque won, it was a Pyrrhic victory. Those vodka-like things had been specially added with some kind of bubble drink. Once he drank it, the smell of alcohol would rush to his head. Even though Duque had used all his magic circuits and had the system elf help his body detoxify, his combat ability was still reduced by more than half. Asking Duque to go there now was like sending himself to his death. Duque shook his head like a rattle drum. Be good and send me back to the guest house." Vanessa agreed. But in a place where Duque didn't notice, Vanessa smiled as if she had succeeded. Groggy, Duque first went to the toilet to vomit. Then he let Vanessa help him wipe his body and fell on the bed like a dead dog. "System elf, other than those on the safety list, if anyone else comes near, you have to wake me up even if you use electric shock." "Understood. Don't worry, host." Chapter 1099. Ugh. The feeling of a hangover was terrible. His head was splitting and he clearly wanted to sleep, but he couldn't. He breathed heavily into the room and the stench of alcohol made him want to vomit. Unfortunately, he had already vomited everything he could, and the rest had entered his blood vessels. He could only hope for his liver to break down more alcohol enzymes so that he could sober up faster. In a daze, Duque noticed that someone was touching him. The system genie showed a green light. That meant he was on the same side. Duque didn't care. Anyway, he was a weakling now and he was counting on others to serve him. That person took advantage of the darkness to come up, and her soft little hands groped him. Then Duque realized that she seemed to be using armor break on him. "Don't worry about me. Let me sleep." Huff. The other party seemed to be startled, but then came a mosquito-like reply. "Okay." Wait. Something seemed wrong. Although his body senses were rather slow, Duque could still feel the strange touch when the other party was gently and carefully sharpening Duque's godly sword. Duque forced his heavy eyelids open and saw a blonde head. Without long ears, was it a human? The only blonde human female around him was Jaina. But Jaina definitely didn't have this kind of hair that reached her waist. Duque suddenly woke up. He finally saw who it was and cried out involuntarily, "Kalia?" Like a stupid thief who had been caught stealing for the first time, Kalia froze, completely at a loss for what to do. However, in the next moment, 2 lines of tears rushed out of Kalia's eyes and slid down her still elegant cheeks. "It's me. Can't I do anything? Duque, do you hate me that much?" The moonlight shone into the room, making Kalia's bright blonde hair shine. Time passed, but the years still left traces on the face and body of this once beautiful princess. Under the moonlight, there were already some crow's feet at the corners of Kalia's eyes. Kneeling at the end of the bed, her unreserved female body was full of the traces of a mature woman. Sitting up, Duque suddenly sighed. "It's been 20 years. That's right. It had been 20 years. From the very beginning when they first met, there were a few short but interesting conversations. Then he helped Kalia fake her death. Then 5 years ago when Arthis killed his father, he forced Kalia to return to Lordaeron to ascend to the throne. It had been 20 years since then. Actually, ever since Duque found out from Vanessa that Kalia refused to use his eternal blessing, Duque knew Kalia's decision. Returning to her youth was seen by her as a breakup gift, but Kalia refused to accept it. Therefore she would rather appear in front of Duque in her youthful appearance. Her tears were still flowing, causing Duque's heart to ache. "Yeah. It's been 20 years, but in these 20 years, I've never regretted even for a second." Kalia's voice was still crisp and soft. It was like an awl that pierced straight into Duque's heart. Duque's mouth moved for a long time and he let out a long sigh. "You're so silly. I've always done those things purely because I don't want the heavens to destroy your beauty." Leaning over lightly, Kalia sat on Duque's knees and put her hands on Duque's shoulders. "So what? The only one who saved me from that cage called the palace was Duque. The only one who gave me the most regretless youth, and let me enjoy 10 years of freedom that I couldn't even dream of, was Duque. Maybe in your eyes I'm just a passerby. But in my eyes you're all I have. So even if I don't want to return to Lordaeron, as long as it's your wish, I'll do it." Duque was silent. Kalia's forehead gently touched Duque's forehead, and her tears flowed even more. "I'm sorry. I know that you like the Windrunner sisters the most, and I know that you don't like me, but I really like you too much and I love you too much. In the beginning I was willing to wait silently. But you accidentally went away for 10 years and immediately after you came back there was a fierce battle and then you disappeared for more than 4 years. What else could Duque say? He was also very helpless. It was always the void or the river of time. Sorry works, I'm willing to say it 100,000 times, 1,000,000 times. But I really don't want to lie to myself anymore and wait like a fool. I've waited for 20 years and I really can't accept that I won't have any emotional interaction with you in the future, and that I'll end my life like this. So, even if what I'm going to do next is wrong, please forgive me, okay?" After saying that, Kalia wanted to act recklessly. Who knew that Duque would suddenly push her away? Kalia was extremely shocked. "Weren't you drugged?" Needless to ask, it must be someone close to him who was a spy. He shouldn't have let Vanessa stay by Kalia's side in the first place. Damn it, a good maid has become bad. Duque's face twitched. "Damn it, Vanessa, you bastard maid, I'll deal with you later." In the maid's room outside the door, even though the soundproofing was good, Vanessa, who was not asleep, suddenly felt a chill. Turning back, Duque fiercely looked at Kalia. "Idiot woman. You even gave up your last chance to escape from my clutches. Don't blame the world for your stupidity. You're finished, just wait to become my collection for eternity." After Duque's malicious words, Kalia's tears turned into laughter. "Good. I've waited for this day for 20 years. Take this, watch my throat slash." Duque's godly sword stabbed forward, and the cruel sword edge instantly pierced through. Kalia was like a swan that had been shot by a sharp arrow. Her long and perfect neck was stretched to the limit because of the pain, and the tears that had already been gushing out were like a broken dam. But this time they were tears of joy. At the same time, because of the pain, her throat seemed to be sealed and she could not say a single word. That's right, Duque was indeed very rough. But for a woman who was crazy for love and was willing to throw herself at him like a moth to a flame, for a woman who had waited for 20 years and was not willing to wait for even a second more. Even a second more was torture. This was just right. Duque. Duque. Kalia seemed to want to pour out the feelings that had accumulated in her heart for 20 years. She did not do anything but cried out Duque's name the whole time. Unknowingly it was dawn. Duque, that eternal blessing, I'd better use it. Otherwise I won't have confidence in front of those beautiful sisters who won't age. Yes. Chapter 1100. On the 2nd of January, Queen Kalia suddenly summoned the ministers of the Rotterdam kingdom urgently. A large number of nobles looked at the radiant queen on the throne in astonishment, completely speechless. In order to avoid suspicion, Duque asked Kalia to ingest the blessing of eternal life in stages. The changes would not be too obvious in a short period of time. However, just because her appearance did not change did not mean that her spirit did not change. The old ministers, Mograine and Abendis, knew that the queen had not been happy in the past few years. However, they had no choice. Kalia was the only legitimate heir of the royal family. If they did not support her to ascend the throne, all the people of the Rotterdam kingdom would be like wandering ghosts. They would lose their loyalty and cohesion. That was a deep-rooted concept that had been rooted in this land for 2,800 years and had been passed down for countless generations. Since the day the queen ascended the throne, the old ministers had been worried about the continuation of the royal bloodline. Even though there were countless young nobles in the country who had launched an emotional attack on Queen Kalia, they were all chased away and killed. Everyone knew that Queen Kalia only had one him in her heart. The problem was that although that guy was good, no one knew where he had died all year round. Besides, he had a few queens who had an unclear relationship with him. The people of the Rotterdam kingdom could accept an extremely powerful husband, but they would never accept their queen running off to be a lover. All right, Queen Kalia, who had been frowning and forcing a smile since Lin Li's disappearance, suddenly changed 180 degrees today. Considering the news of Lin Li's visit, Mograine and Abendis looked at each other, and saw the same answer in each other's eyes. Sigh. Still unable to escape from Duque's clutches? Queen Kalia said, "Once upon a time, I also thought that noble bloodline was everything. Obviously this thinking is wrong. The great commander of the alliance, Duke Marcus, once said something that I deeply agree with. People are noble because of their great deeds, not because of their bloodline." The queen's words caused a commotion among the ministers. They were too embarrassed to interrupt the queen because she had not finished speaking. True nobles such as Anjouan Lothar have the noblest sentiments and the grandest thoughts. When he discovered that Thoradin the Great's bloodline was a restriction to the various human kingdoms, and even to the growing number of races in the alliance, he decisively chose to end the noblest bloodline in his own hands. As for the despicable, even if they have the so-called noble bloodline, just like my brother Arthas who killed my father King Tyrrhenas, they will also do things that will anger the gods. The mention of Arthas was an eternal pain in the hearts of all the people of Rotterdam. He killed his father and annihilated all the nobles and citizens of the Rotterdam city. He even spread the plague and death throughout most of the Rotterdam kingdom's territory. If it weren't for the fact that the various countries had suffered great losses and were unable to go on an expedition to Northrend, the people of the Rotterdam kingdom would have long gone to take revenge. Now that Kalia said that Arthas was a despicable person with a noble bloodline, it was really hard to refute. Especially when Kalia said this as the only heir of the Menethil royal family, no one dared to object. Queen Kalia stood up. She seemed to have some difficulty moving, but her beautiful appearance combined with her righteousness made her soft voice sound powerful. 2,800 years ago, my ancestor opened up the then barren Tirisful forest for the humans, so he was honored as king from the leader of a clan. 2,800 years later, Arthas was stripped of his right to be king because of his heinous crimes. With history as a mirror, only people with both talent and virtue are qualified to be king. So if there is such a day, someone more suitable than me to lead Rotterdam appears. Even if his surname is not Menethil, I, Kalia Menethil, will not be stingy with my throne. I will abdicate. The words of a king were an oath that was thousands of times more serious than a nail on a board. In a sense, Kalia's words were like opening a Pandora's box with her own hands. For people who were greedy for power, this was undoubtedly asking for trouble. But everyone knew that Kalia had said more than once that she did not want to be queen. This was completely forcing a duck onto a perch. If it was not Duque looking for her but someone else, she would definitely not be willing to come back. It was originally like this in history. It was only when the Burning Legion's universe fleet played large-scale landing battles around Azeroth that Kalia, who had been missing for almost 30 years, resolutely came out of seclusion and participated in this war against evil. Mograine and Abendis sighed. 2 days ago, they heard that Duque was in Stormwind City against the nobles and wanted to implement large-scale reforms. They did not expect Kalia to be the first to take the lead to support Duque today. Think about it, even the queen of the old powerful Rotterdam took the lead to announce that only sages could be kings. What right did the small nobles in the south have to cling to the so-called aristocratic regulations from 2,800 years ago? This was simply a slap in the face to the nobles of Stormwind City. Kalia did not give the nobles of Rotterdam any room to refute, and directly announced the end of the meeting. One could imagine that the wave of sages being kings that would be set off next would sweep through the entire human world. After the meeting, Kalia quickly went to the side hall. Jaina was already waiting at the door. Sister Kalia. Sister Jaina. The two queens hugged each other intimately. They had been best friends since they were very young. After all, they were both princesses and were close in age. But later, as Jaina was married to Duque by King Theron and left for the Elven Forest, the two had no choice but to alienate each other. Unexpectedly, after a big circle, they were back together again. Jaina brought Kalia into the side hall. Only then did Kalia realize that the queens and leaders were already there. Seeing Kalia's awkward walk, Jaina snickered and laughed maliciously. Speaking of which, Duque is a big jerk. He had to torment us human girls. The three of us were going to chase him. Us are all very loving. That's not it. He wasn't gentle to me at all. I insisted that I didn't want him, but he still bullied me regardless and forced me to learn those shameful things. The pure and holy Tyrant seemed to be reminiscing as she held her face in her hands. The other 6 were shocked. As the high priestess of the moon goddess, Tyrant had turned into a female chauffeur. When she suddenly started racing, a pure girl like Kalia could not afford to be hurt. Lucia could only change the topic in embarrassment. But is it really okay for you to do this? I'm immortal. I'm not a talented person. If I take the throne, there might be all sorts of bad things that will happen. Why don't you take advantage of the fact that Mograine and the other old ministers are still here to arrange things and find a chance to retire? Chapter 1101. Not every queen was like Kalia, who said to let go and then let go. It had nothing to do with greed for power. It was purely determined by one's ability and personality. Kalia did not have any special talents. She was not strong in battle and she was not as good at internal affairs as Lucia. However, she was more suitable to be a spiritual leader than anyone else. Since her ability was at the level of a mascot, she might as well retire early and have a peaceful life. Otherwise, without external protection, she would get into trouble sooner or later while sitting on the throne. She would either become a puppet or lose her life due to a betrayal. At that moment, Duque came in. Seeing the harmonious atmosphere, he rubbed his nose in embarrassment. The throne meeting is about to begin. Everyone get ready. Just as he was about to run, Queen Sylvanas suddenly put a hand on Duque's shoulder. Feeling guilty, Duque was immediately petrified. I swear I won't add any more sisters for you. Duque surrendered first. Pfft. Sasha burst out laughing. Second sister, you scared him. The others in the harem also smiled. Only Kalia buried her face in Jaina's chest, not daring to look at anyone. Queen Sylvanas could not even be angry. She put her hands on her hips. No. We discussed it all night at the pajama party and came to a conclusion. What conclusion? Queen Sylvanas seemed to have lost her temper. I really don't know if you did it on purpose or not. We sisters are either queens or leaders. Most of us are so busy that we don't have time to accompany you all day. None of us can let go of our careers or our people. And the world is getting more and more dangerous. So we can only let you take advantage of us, you little bastard. Unknowingly, these beauties had gathered around Duque. Their beautiful eyes wandered and finally landed on the oldest Tyrant. Tyrant smiled. Duque, you are someone who can do great things. Perhaps the safety of the entire world of Azeroth rests on your shoulders. Since we are willing to follow you, we do not want to burden you anymore. Instead of crushing you to the point where you can't breathe, it's better to let go and let you soar freely." Aurelia, who was the first to become Duque's woman, said, "Yes. We have an agreement as long as you make all the sisters happy first. Do as you wish." Although Dumuk was touched, his facial muscles were still twitching. An infinite harem sounds great, doesn't it? However, the prerequisite was that he had to please all of these ladies. Only then would he be able to increase his happiness by one. Duque suddenly felt that one of Gu Tianla's words was very true. A man's energy is limited. But the number of girls in this world was limitless. Using a limited amount of energy to bombard an unlimited amount of girls, this in itself is a losing battle. If he continued to act recklessly, he would only be finding trouble for himself. Duque spoke righteously, and with the aura of an honest and reliable young master, he raised 3 fingers and said, "I swear." Before they could make their vows, the heavens suddenly sent a bolt of lightning from the clear sky, as if a group of fellow Daoists were going through a tribulation. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. After a while there was a downpour followed by sleet and snow. Even Tyrande, who looked so serious, laughed, not to mention the other younger ladies. "Ha! Ha!" Sasha, who had the most carefree personality, laughed so hard that her stomach hurt. She laughed so hard that she almost choked on her breath. She stopped teasing Duque. According to their ages, first Tyrande, then the 3 Windrunner sisters, followed by Alicia, Kalia and Jaina. All of them came up to him and gave him hot kisses. No more, no less. It was as if they were on a stopwatch, each kiss lasting 10 seconds. These people were all immortal or long-lived races that could easily live for more than 10,000 years. For example, Tyrande received Teldrassil's blessing when she was 3,000 years old, and her age was frozen until recently. The first 100 years of an elf's life were considered their childhood, and the last 100 years were considered their old age. The rest of the time in between was considered their youth. Therefore, even the oldest Tyrande and Aurelia were only about 25 years old by human standards. Looking at such a harem, Duque was so happy that he almost fainted. Duque's moral integrity was very full, except when he was dissatisfied. There's nothing wrong with that. When Tyrande privately brought up how to solve the beastman's logging problem, Duque patted his chest and promised to leave it to him. That night there was a formal welcome banquet. At the same time, it was announced that the Night Elves had officially joined the alliance, and a grand ceremony was held. The Candlelight Club spent 4 years in this city, using a full set of mechanical equipment to fill in the ruins of Lordaeron. They then rebuilt Lordaeron by the lake to the west of the ruins, and held a grand bonfire party. Music could be heard everywhere, and the streets were filled with joyful and joyous alliance people. During the throne meeting on the 3rd of January, the decision to let Duque, who had been cleansed of his curse, return to being the alliance's commander was unanimously approved. At the same time, in order to deal with the possible crisis of the Burning Canyon and Burning Steppes, the Iron Furnace Fort would be the alliance's leader for the next 5 years. The ceremonial officer announced, "Let's welcome the tribe's emissary, the Darkspear Trolls leader, Wajin." Wajin came in, one hand on his chest, and bowed to the alliance's leader, Magni, and the commander, Duque. "I bring greetings from the tribe's chief, Sar." At the same time, as comrades who once fought side by side against the evil Burning Legion, the chief hopes that we can solve the dispute over the wood in a peaceful way now that the Night Elves have announced their participation in the alliance. Sar had sent the wisest Wajin, and not some beastman who only had muscles left in his brain. He had good intentions in the first place. Of course, only Dooku and the other leaders who were wise enough to understand the tribe could see this. If we can get along, we are brothers. If we can't, we are strangers. The dwarves have never been afraid of anyone who dares to use force, Magni said with a heroic look. If anyone thought that the dwarf king was a fool, they would definitely be tricked to death. Because his next words were, "Duque, I don't know the situation there, so I'll leave it to you." Tyrande also spoke at the right time. "Since the Night Elves have officially joined the alliance, I believe the alliance will give us a solution that will satisfy both sides." Duque raised his eyebrows. "All right, first of all, does the Night Elves agree to let the tribe enter Grey Valley to cut wood?" Tyrande shook her head. "Apologies, trees are not just a simple resource for the Night Elves. Most of the trees in Grey Valley are old. When the oak trees and other ancient trees are old enough, they can develop intelligence and evolve into ancient trees of life, ancient trees of wisdom, or ancient trees of war. They are the symbiotic partners of our people and also our weapons. We cannot allow the tribe to enter our territory and cut wood. Wuxia suddenly felt bitter in his mouth. Chapter 1102. Woken bowed again. I'm sorry, but I would like to clarify something here. Duque spread his hands. Go ahead. Ever since the tribe crossed the Kalimdor continent and took root in the barren, ownerless land of Durotor, the tribe has been trying to avoid invading the territories of other intelligent races. When Woken said this, Tyrant could not help but clench her fists and gently bite her lips. How could the death of the demigod Cenarius be forgotten so easily? Of course, Woken noticed Tyrant's reaction, but because of his position he could only continue. The tribe has not mastered the more advanced construction methods. Out of development needs, the tribe needs at least 100,000 tons of wood. This number almost made Tyrant jump on the spot. Dang. It was processed wood, not raw wood. Converted to raw wood, the number was even more exaggerated. Woken braced himself. According to preliminary estimates, this is only the first phase of our needs. Only the first phase. Tyrant almost wanted to declare war on behalf of the Night Elves. Woken continued to explain, the tribe has no intention of making things difficult for the Night Elves. We have no other choice. The nearby barren lands, Stonetalan Mountains, Mulgore, Thousand Needles and Dustwallow have no suitable wood. Although Faralas in the southwest has good wood, we can't transport it out of the Thousand Needles, which is extremely bad terrain. If possible, the tribe is willing to exchange any of our existing resources. Tyrant gritted her teeth. The Night Elves will never trade their friends. The atmosphere suddenly fell to a freezing point. Woken had a headache over this matter. The tribe needed a huge amount of wood, but they could not use force. Coupled with the Night Elves joining the alliance, the tribe could only be cautious on this matter. Tyrant could not help but look at Duque, who was sitting in the seat of honor. Tyrant's mood was very complicated. She had absolute trust in Duque, but she did not only represent herself. However, she did not represent just herself. If Duke did things unfairly, then the voices within the clan against joining the alliance would quickly rise, and by then there would be a big problem. Duque raised his hand and made a gesture of suppression. Lord Whisperwind, please don't get too worked up. Wuxia, could you please tell me the standard of the wood your tribe wants? Woking immediately replied, converted to logs, it's at least 30 yards high, hard enough to be used as the main beam of a house. Duque smiled. That's easy. Grey Valley was not the only place in the world that had this kind of wood. Just the Elwyn Forest and Twilight Forest within the territory of Stormwind Kingdom have plenty of such wood. Although there was a lot of good timber around Eagle Nest Mountain, a third of the areas mentioned above were directly under Duque's jurisdiction. He was the master of his territory. If he could make the decision himself, he would be even more daring. Perhaps this was what it meant to be pretentious. Really? This time Wuxia was really happy. Do you have a sample? Of course. Duque snapped his fingers and Vanessa, who was wearing a maid's uniform, came up. Inform the Mason Brotherhood to bring a sleeper in. Understood. From the beginning of the reconstruction of Lordaeron City, Lucia and Jaina began to help Lordaeron build 2 railways. One was from the North Flow Coast to Lordaeron City, which was convenient for reconstruction. The other was the East-West Railway artery that traversed the woodlands of Tirisful and the eastern and western Plaguelands, all the way to Tyr's Hand, connecting the entire old territory of Lordaeron. In the capital there was no shortage of materials to build railways. Not long after, 8 big men came in carrying a train sleeper that had long been cut into square strips. Of course, it could not be ordinary goods that could be used as a sleeper. Moreover, the steam engines in this world were far worse than the steam engines in the industrial era before Duque crossed over. Because of the industrial level, iron and steel were still far from the standards that Duque wanted. As a result, the steam engines here were larger and heavier, and even the train tracks were twice as large as those on Earth. As a result, the requirements for the sleepers were also much higher. Wuxia's eyes lit up when he saw this. He touched the wood, knocking here and there, then looked up. Can the Alliance guarantee that the wood sold to the Horde is of this quality? And can the Alliance really transport so much wood across the sea? Don't joke. As early as 4 years ago, the Alliance could already transport 100,000 troops and equipment across the sea to the Kalimdor continent. It's really not difficult to transport 100,000 tons of wood. Duque smiled. As for the quality, I can also guarantee it here. Of course, there will be losses when transporting such a large amount of wood across the sea, and the price will inevitably need to be adjusted. What does the Alliance want from the Horde? Wajin asked. Ores. High-purity ores, mainly iron ore. Other rare ores are also needed, such as gold, mithril, true silver, thorium. When Duque said this, the eyes of the few dwarves next to him sparkled. Magni did not look like a king at all, and his mouth was actually drooling like a dog. Duque rolled his eyes at Magni. When Bulang saw this, he hurriedly pulled his big brother who had a blacksmith soul to wake Magni up. Damn, don't affect the Alliance's image here, okay? If it weren't for the fact that you are the king of the Alliance and the Horde, I would definitely beat you up. Wajin thought for a moment. After all, the Horde was in urgent need of wood, so he nodded and agreed. Then the specific proportion and method of the transaction. Now that the Alliance has recognized the Barren Lands as the Horde's territory, and Dustwallow Swamp is also under Theramore's control, then the transaction will be found near the border. As for the price and details of the transaction, we will let the people below discuss it. When two major forces negotiated, it was always the boss who set the tone, and the people below would grind out the details and the price. For the sake of insurance, Wajin proposed to go to the Elven Forest to see the goods. Duque agreed and welcomed Wajin to the Elven Forest as a guest. After sending Wajin away, Duque said, "Your Majesty Proudmoore, the transaction with the Horde will be handed over to you." Jaina nodded. "Is there anything I need to pay attention to?" "First of all, we must be fair whether it is price, quantity or quality. We agreed to give 10,000 tons of high-quality wood, not one less. For the Horde, the difference in the content of ores must not exceed 5%. Sal is a fair guy. As long as we are strict enough, they will do the same." Jaina's heart was a little cold. If the requirements were so high, then at least 10,000 tons at a time. In order to avoid loss, at least 13,000 tons would be safe. This way the transportation costs would obviously skyrocket. Chapter 1103. Then those who are interested in the ores can pay cultiras to build an ironworks in Theramore. The ores can be melted into metal ingots and shipped back. When Duque said this, Magni's eyes lit up. First of all, this would greatly reduce the pressure on transportation. At the same time, it would open the door for the Steel Stove Fort to join in. Secondly, developing mining in Theramore would give Theramore an industrial base. This made Theramore's position even more prominent. Jaina was very happy about this. After all, no matter how Kultiras rebuilt his land, he could only rely on shipping due to his geographical location. But Theramore was different. Duque's next words made the Alliance powerhouses understand what it meant to reveal the dagger. The broken roads in Dustwallow Swamp are not suitable for transportation. When the time comes, Proudmoore can bring one of the chiefs there and announce that a railway will be built from Theramore all the way to the border of the Barren Lands. Of course, if the Horde feels that it is too troublesome to rely on human and animal power in the future, the Alliance can also help the Horde build a railway through the entire Barren Lands. For free. Those who had not experienced the era of railway transportation would never understand how prosperous the transportation of goods, people and culture would be after the railway was built. Although the teleportation portal could be reached in an instant, compared to the high mana consumption, only the railway was truly cheap and efficient. Ever since Duque started to promote the railway in the Alliance had completely changed in the past 20 years. This was especially so for Lord Darren. After Queen Kalia came to power, she forcefully pushed for the development of the railway. That was why Lord Darren was able to recover its vitality in just 4 years. If the Horde dared to bring the railway into the Barren Lands, it would be like putting the sword of Damocles on their necks. It would be fine if the Alliance and the Horde did not start a war. Once a war broke out, the core areas of the Horde would be destroyed. Even if peace was maintained, a railway to the border of the Barren Lands was a hidden and fatal noose that could be tightened at any time. After all, it was 100 times easier to build a railway on solid and barren land than to build a railway in a swamp filled with mud. Once the most difficult part was settled, the rest would be easy. Facing Duque's piercing gaze, Tyrant immediately realized that this was the Alliance's sneaky counterattack against the tribe's suppression of the Night Elves. Duque's passionate gaze caused Tyrant's entire body to heat up, and she did not dare to meet his gaze. "All right, next up, Your Majesty Windrunner." Servanas, who was called out by Duque, was a little stunned. He nodded. "Is there anything I can do for you?" Duque's lips curled into a smile. "There's news that Anastrian, the traitor who shamelessly betrayed Quell Dorii and caused the old Silver Moon City and the Well of the Sun to suffer a catastrophe, is currently leading the remnants of his undead army to Winter Spring. Doesn't Sin Dorii have any thoughts about this?" Servanas stood up abruptly. "The Alliance, please uphold justice for Sin Dorii and help him." Facing the map of the world of Azeroth that was laid out in the middle of the hall, Duque formed a long blue elemental line on his right index finger, pointing at the Azhara region in the northeast of the Kalimdor continent. Azhara has been the territory of the Night Elves since ancient times. It's also the area around the ancient Azhara city in the Ancient War. It's only right for Sin Dorii, a descendant of the High Elves, to reclaim this area. When Duque said this, everyone understood. That's right. To the Sin Dorii kingdom on the other side of the sea, Azhara was undoubtedly a troublesome enclave. But combining the two special meanings of an ancient legacy and the pursuit of a traitor, things became different. Moreover, if they developed the Azhara region and unearthed some ancient High Elven magic documents, the Sin Dorii mages would definitely be overjoyed. Duque turned his head. "Lord Whisperwind, does the Night Elves have any objections to the Alliance's arrangement of Sin Dorii returning to Azhara?" Tyrant thought for a moment. "As long as Sin Dorii promises not to abuse arcane magic like their ancestors, the Night Elves have no objections. After all, our two races share the same roots. After all, in the future the Night Elves, Blood Elves and High Elves would also unite again." Duque was happy to see this happen. Servanas raised his right hand. "I swear in the name of the Queen of Sin Dorii that all magic experiments of Radiant Moon rank and above will be strictly supervised." "Then the Night Elves have no problems." Duque continued. "All right. The last and most important issue is regarding the Blackrock Orcs and Black Iron Dwarves who are active in the Scorching Gorge and Burning Steppes. Those black-skinned orcs should be hung to death." Magni took out his warhammer and waved it around. "I'm going to smash them again and again. Don't let me see them or I'll aim my musket at their eye sockets and shoot each of them with a bullet." Duque's system elves gave him a rare reminder. As Magni's words were too crude, all sensitive words had been replaced with smash. It is strongly recommended that the host not listen to it. If you need a playback or translation, please click yes. Duque silently clicked no in his mind. The Dwarven War of the Three Hammers had passed many years ago. Although the Bronzebeard Dwarves had reconciled with the Wildhammer Dwarves, the Black Iron Dwarves, the historical event of saving the Dwarf Princess had yet to happen. Duque felt a pain in the ass about this. He thought back to when he had accepted a quest in the game to save Magni's precious daughter, Princess Moira Bronzebeard. When he arrived at the scene, he found that he and his teammates had to endure the attacks of this silly princess who had Stockholm Syndrome and had fallen in love with her father's enemy, the Iron King Drogon Thurissen, to deal with the Iron King. All right. After the Black Iron King was taken care of, even more shocking information was revealed. Moira announced that she was pregnant with Drogon's child, and that she was in love with Drogon. Not only did she refuse to return to Iron Furnace Castle, she was also prepared to give birth to this child. The players were in a state of confusion. But, in order to unite the Three Hammers once again and form the Three Hammers Council, Duque very unkindly wished Magni well in his heart. Prepare to be a lord. Of course, Duque now looked completely unconcerned. After Magni had finished and calmed down, he said, "Things are far more troublesome than we thought. The latest information I received shows that the remnants of the Blackrock Orcs, the Black Iron Dwarves, and the Elemental Lord faction that escaped from the Battle of the Scorching Gorge all seem to be on the move." Chapter 1104. As usual, Duque was prepared to present the intelligence and convince the kings with evidence. However, this time Duque was dumbfounded. Magni waved his short and muscular hand. "Intelligence says. Please, I've known you for 20 years, Duque. Anything you emphasize is definitely not a good thing. This stupid world was almost destroyed for the third time. Even if you tell me that the fourth apocalypse is coming, I won't be surprised at all. Just tell me who is the boss of the enemy this time. How far do we have to go? Tell us and we'll do it. The dwarves liked to ignore the process and go straight to the result. The dwarves were known for being rough and direct. He didn't expect the other kings and bosses to all nod in agreement. The great craftsman Jurban wiped his small round glasses with a cloth and absent-mindedly agreed. Yes. They just say it. Is it a local war or an all-out war? Tell us, let us have an idea and it'll be easier to prepare firearms. Just give us a copy of your intelligence and speech, and we'll use it to fool the people below us. Yes. My storm warhammer is thirsting for it. Kudrin was also heckling. All of a sudden, the dwarves who needed to be convinced all raised their hands and feet and voted in favor. Duque's mouth turned into an O shape. He suddenly realized that the speech he prepared was useless. Looking around, his own queen didn't need to be convinced. They had already started to mobilize. The Dalajan's boss was Ronan, and he would definitely follow Duque's lead. Duque himself was the representative of Stormwind this time. Alright, it's a unanimous vote. Duque didn't argue anymore. He directly walked to the military map, pressed his hands on the edge of the map table and leaned forward. It was a posture like a tiger's roar. There are two factions of enemies. One is the remnants of the Black Dragons, Prince Nefarian and Princess Onyxia. Right now, Nefarian is controlling the Blackrock Orcs and a large number of Draconians and Draconians occupying the upper and lower levels of the Blackrock Tower. The other faction is... Duque raised his right hand with his palm facing the sky. Suddenly, an illusion of a fire giant with an inverted triangular upper body and a flaming hammer appeared. During the era of the Dark Empire, which was even older than the Ancient Era, there was a fire elemental lord, Ragnaros, who occupied the southeastern part of the ancient Kalimdor continent. He single-handedly turned the ancient Redridge Mountains into the burning steppes of today. Damn it! Who was this guy? Was it finally going to wake up? Alright, if that's the case, we, the bronze-beard dwarves, will take responsibility. Magni stood up abruptly. Kudrin had the same reaction. Count the wild hammer dwarves in. At the end of the day, it was all because of the War of the Three Hammers that Ragnaros, who followed the ancient gods, appeared in this world. Emperor Tharisan had lost, but he wanted to rely on summoning to make a comeback, which resulted in him summoning the Flame Demon King. Not only did he die, even his dark iron dwarves had become slaves. Duque said loudly. In fact, Ragnaros showed signs of recovery in the final battle of the Second Dark Portal. At that time, the fire elemental giant Baron Geddon appeared. I think everyone still has an impression of him. The big shots of the Alliance who had experienced the Second Dark Portal nodded. So, our worst-case scenario is that the Black Dragons and the fire elementals attack us at the same time. Queen Sylvanas said, "Can't we let the Dragon Sleep Temple deal with the Black Dragons?" It would have been better if Queen Sylvanas hadn't mentioned it, but after she did, Duque was also angry. As one of the witnesses of history, he finally knew why the Black Dragons were so arrogant that no dragon came to deal with them. In fact, after I returned from the River of Time, I went to find Nozdormu and also to the Dragon Sleep Temple. Everyone, do you know why there was no news of the Burning Legion on planet Azeroth after the death of Archimonde, one of their two commanders? Can't be that they were afraid, right? Kaliasit. Duque sighed. Of course not. The Burning Legion relied on the fact that as long as the demons didn't die in the twisting nether, they could resurrect indefinitely. Now there are over 10,000 demons coming to the atmosphere of planet Azeroth every day to cause trouble. Anyway, the four major dragon races are very busy now. Atmosphere? Are you referring to above the clouds? Kudrin asked. You can say that. The atmosphere also includes low-level clouds, but the place where the dragons and demons fight is higher, where there is no air. Can we only rely on the power of us mortals? Ronan touched his beard. Duque corrected. If it was the Blackrock Orcs and the Iron Dwarves, then the mortal army can still deal with them. But the most important thing now is to organize an elite team of extraordinaires to go deep into the Blackrock Mountain called the Molten Core and deal with the Fire Elemental King inside. If possible, we can deal with Nefarian at the top of the Blackrock Tower. You seem to have missed a target. Jaina frowned. Duque smiled. No, I didn't miss it. The next plan is the key. At the beginning of January, the Alliance Conference came up with a series of new policies. It involved various aspects. Diplomatically, the Night Elves joined the Alliance and reached an agreement with the Horde. Militarily, the Alliance announced that in May and October, to commemorate the 20th anniversary of the Alliance, there would be a military parade in Stormwind City, which was the center of the first war against the Dark Portal and Lordaeron, which established the Alliance. In terms of internal affairs, apart from a package of policies aimed at strengthening trade and cultural exchanges within the Alliance, the most attractive thing was that from February onwards, a grand festival would be held almost every other month to celebrate the 20th anniversary. February 14th Valentine's Day, May 7th Children's Week, June 21st Midsummer Day, September 20th Brewfest. When the news spread, the entire Eastern Kingdom was in an uproar as the people spread the news. It was no wonder that the people reacted so enthusiastically. After all, the Eastern Kingdom had been in turmoil for the past 20 years. The 3 wars against the Dark Portal basically plowed the entire Eastern Kingdom back and forth. Many people fled from Stormwind to Lordaeron and from Lordaeron back to Stormwind, crossing 2 continents in a single round trip. Especially Arthas' inhumane undead legion, it sent chills down the spine of the people. Although the Scourge army had been completely wiped out from Lordaeron, the occasional massacre of villages by the followers of the Church of the Damned still served as a disguised reminder to the people of the terrifying existence. Until now, many people were still worried about the return of the Lich King. It could be said that as long as Arthas and Nazul were not destroyed by the Holy Light, the people who had experienced the Scourge of the Undead would not be able to sleep well. Now that the Alliance announced a series of festivals, it could more or less dilute the fear and sorrow in the hearts of the people. Chapter 1105. On the 5th of January, in Stormwind City, Countess Anristo's mansion, Princess Xianxia threw the thick stack of intelligence reports onto the ground. Haha. It seems like we've been underestimated. I was expecting something from this Duke Marcus who murdered our father. Unfortunately, pretending to have a military parade and then besieging the Blackrock Tower? What a boring move. The one who spoke was a black-haired human man with a flaming crown on his head leaning against the wall. Unfortunately, his appearance was similar to that of the Lord of Presto back then. Anyone who had seen the human form of Nesario would quickly associate him with the Black Dragon clan. He was naturally Nesario's eldest son, Nefarian. Xianxia elegantly took a sip of the red wine in the glass. A drop of bright red wine flowed down the corner of her lips, making the black-haired dragon beauty look extremely flirtatious. Heh. My brother, are you planning to let those filthy orcs attack Stormwind City or the Iron Furnace Castle in advance? Or is your trump card Ragnaros who is under your nest? The Blackrock orcs are just a bunch of slaves and watchdogs. As for the King of Flames, I hate communicating with such violent fellows because they can't be talked to properly. Nefarian shrugged helplessly. Oh, in the end you still choose to trust your toys? Xianxia did not hide the sarcasm on her face. Those precious experimental subjects will be the greatest support for me to rule over this land in the future. Xianxia interrupted Nefarian before he could finish his sentence. Ah, what a joke. Your inferior toys might not even be enough to deal with the weak humans, and you still want to deal with the dragon army of the Dragon Slumber Shrine? Nefarian's face turned green. Stupid sister. You don't understand the greatness of science. Instead, you've been staying in the human territory. Aren't you afraid of being discovered and surrounded? Ha 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 ha. Xianxia laughed again with an enchanting and evil tone. The 4 dragon kings are not here who can stop me. Not to mention if they really angered me I would burn down Stormwind City and kill their King William and Prince Andoin. Then I would find a chance to kill that Duke Marcus. When that time comes, let Stormwind fall into disunity and chaos. Humph. Arrogance and confidence were 2 different things. Since mortals could kill Archimonde, then our demigod bodies might not be that reliable. Be careful, my sister. I don't want to see your head hanging in Stormwind City's King's Valley next time. You're the one. Just don't let the Fire Demon King burn you. The 2 siblings parted on bad terms. That's right. Although the Black Dragons were individually very strong, their selfish characteristics made it very rare for them to be wholeheartedly devoted to the outside world. Even though they were siblings, they each had their own standpoints. The Black Dragon siblings did not know that thousands of meters away, the youngest of the Windrunner sisters, Lilith, had activated dragon tracking and easily sensed Nefarian's arrival and departure. As expected, Lilith sighed softly and then disappeared into the night. On the 6th of January, in the Fairlas region in the southwest of the Kalimdor continent, a bloody and exciting gladiatorial tournament was about to be held in the arena of the Hammer of Misfortune. Unlike the original history, the gladiatorial tournament had disappeared from the Eastern Kingdom because of the destruction of the Lordaeron Kingdom. But now, because of Queen Kalia's benevolence, she hated this kind of cruel and bloody killing, and cancelled the gladiatorial tournament in the Eastern Kingdom. Where there was demand, there would be a market. Perhaps it was because after the Second Battle of the Dark Portal, the orcs had been slaves for more than 10 years that the gladiatorial tournament became popular among the orcs. Slaves from all over the world were sent to the Hammer of Misfortune in Fairlas. They were forced to duel with each other or fight against all kinds of dangerous creatures. Of course, there were also orcs who boasted of their bravery who volunteered to participate in the gladiatorial tournament. This was the only chance for them to legally kill humans in an environment where their chief, Sal, strictly forbade harming people from the Alliance. Similarly, investors from all over the world who pursued excitement traveled thousands of miles, and even crossed the ocean to come here, just to watch the most exciting gladiatorial tournament. On this day, at the highest level of the Hammer of Misfortune's arena, there was a new pair of guests in the VIP suite named Dawn. One had to know that this was not an ordinary VIP suite. Just the cost of the suite for a day was as high as 10,000 Arathor gold coins. When the mysterious owner of the Hammer of Misfortune first set up this suite, he did not expect anyone to be so rich that they could afford the astronomical amount of 10,000 Arathor gold coins a day. This was more like a sky-high price, all for the sake of promoting the second-class, Radiant Moon suite. Who would have thought that today a mysterious investor would appear? Cash payment, no credit allowed. Originally, when the goblin in charge of receiving the guest heard the request, he was already prepared to mock this mysterious tycoon who overestimated himself. He even called for the two-headed ogre behind him, who only had one head left, to come forward. This was because he had never thought that someone would pay for this. From behind the investor, an attendant walked up and opened the space bag without saying a word. Crush. With a crisp sound, a sea of gold coins that could not even be loaded into a carriage poured out in front of the goblin in charge of receiving the guests. The attendant only said one sentence. My master said that if there's more, consider it a tip. After saying that, the mysterious sugar daddy who was the leader, grabbed the blonde masked dancer and walked past the goblin receptionist in a dignified manner. It had to be said that the Dawn VIP suite had some quality. The windows of the suite were made with the latest one-way glass technology from the Iron Stove Fort. When outsiders looked in, it was a field of reflection. In the middle of the suite was a red velvet chair that looked like a large bed. It was very warm and comfortable to sit on. There were 2 stoves on the left and right sides of the room. Outside the room, there were 2 dedicated human attendants adding firewood to the stoves. There were a few ropes hanging from the ceiling in the middle of the room, each corresponding to a service. With a pull, a specific bell would ring, and dedicated attendants would immediately come in to serve the guests. The suite was divided into 2 entrances. The one near the arena was naturally for the distinguished guests. Outside was the lounge for the guards and maids that the guests had brought. Just as he entered the suite and lay down on the chair, the mysterious investor cast a spell to isolate himself from the outside world, and then revealed his true appearance. He was Duque. Yo Jaina, since the main character hasn't appeared yet, do you want to practice alchemy with your master? Chapter 1106. Jaina had already become good friends with Wuxia, so of course Jaina knew what human alchemy was and what ORZ posture was. They were all the same thing. Duque, you bastard. You told me that you have official business that concerns the future of the Alliance. That's why I put down Theramore and came with you, but you tell me this the moment you arrive. Jaina seemed to be angry as she removed her veil. That's right. Isn't it related to the future of the Alliance that we're here to see how William is doing? Aren't you very close to him? We came early and he hasn't gone on stage yet. We're afraid that we'll miss the show if we're too late. Am I to blame? Duque spread his palms and changed the topic. Speaking of which, alchemy? Jaina's expression changed instantly. She was born a princess and had received the strictest etiquette education since she was young. Normally she wouldn't be willing to do that. But Jaina suddenly realized that she and Duque had been apart more often than not over the past few years. Duque had either been blasted into the void or met with an accident and was stuck in the river of time. The first time was 10 years and the second time was 4 years. A great hero with an indomitable spirit naturally had to shoulder the fate of the entire human race and even the entire world. She naturally couldn't be such a petty woman and ask Duque not to save the world and not to do those dangerous things. It was obvious that a new crisis was approaching, and no one knew if they would be able to get through it this time. Especially when they would have to enter the molten core that was like a fiery hell. She didn't even dare to imagine the horrifying scene of Duque or one of her familiar comrades being burnt to a crisp by the flames. "Bastard master, how much do you want me to do?" Jaina murmured to express her anger, but in the end she put aside her reservations and said, "I'm doing this on account of the fact that I haven't had many days alone with you over the past few years." Duque also knew that he had let down any of the women in the harem. He shouldn't have been such a bastard. However, even if he did not go out of his way to pursue them as they got to know each other better, Jaina, Kalia, Alicia, and Tyrande, who were originally famous beauties in history, started to pursue him, or perhaps because of a freak combination of factors, he unknowingly fell deeper into love with them. By the time he came back to his senses, there were already 7 women in the harem. In the face of Jaina's anger and complaints, Duque could only shamelessly go up to her and kiss her. "I know the war is coming. I'm just looking for an excuse to be alone with you." "Humph. At least you have me in your heart." The evil Mr. Du became even more aggressive. "Since you are pretending to be a dancer today, why don't you dance first?" Jaina felt like strangling Duque to death. "You're not jumping." In the face of Duque's questions, Jaina felt her body heat up. "Damn it. I really don't know what I owed you in my previous life to be bullied by you like this in this life." Jaina grumbled. She was afraid that it would not be safe, so she quickly closed the curtains. Then she gently raised her hands at a beautiful angle, and her slender and fair feet began to dance. That sexy waist that drove countless men crazy began to twist like a water snake. Mr. Du's mouth began to dry up. Half an hour later, the voice of the MC sounded. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we will welcome an earth-shattering battle that can be called the Battle of the Century. The two sides are the challengers, the Night Elf Druid Brawl Baremantle, the High Elf Thief Valilla Sagunner, and the dual sword-wielding warrior, Unnamed. Their opponent is the defending champion of the Hammer of Misfortune. Over here. Duque, are you not done yet? The battle is about to start. Alchemy is just a little bit away, wait. I'll be done soon." Duque's godly sword flashed, and the light of his sword flashed as he attacked Jaina. Boo-hoo. A few minutes later, Jaina, who had finally completed the alchemy ritual, quickly tidied up her clothes. However, she realized that she did not even have the strength to stand up. She could only lean against Duque on the recliner and look into the arena. One had to admit that the design of this super VIP room was really great. In the VIP room on the 5th floor, one could see everything in the arena from the recliner and look down through the floor-to-ceiling glass. Coupled with the room's field of vision magnification, one's field of vision could be magnified by up to 10 times as long as one pointed at a certain place. Enjoying the embrace of her lover from behind, Jaina suddenly felt a warm sense of happiness and security. Looking at the 6 people in the arena, Jaina could not help but look at the black-haired young warrior with a scar on his face. Jaina and William had known each other for a long time. It was the first year of the Dark Portal, and Stormwind City had just fallen. Due to their age, William, who was a few years younger than her, preferred to follow Arthas, who was like an adult and was only acquainted with her. At that time, although William pretended to be strong, there was still a hint of weakness and fear in his bones. Now this impression was completely subverted. It was still the same familiar facial contour, but the delicate face that used to be like a little fresh meat had become more defined and defined during these days of life and death. The scar on his face, which was said to have been caused by lightning in the arena, added to his manly charm. There was also his beastly wolf-like eyes. Just looking into them would make one feel as if they would be torn into pieces in the next moment. I seem to understand why you didn't rescue William directly, and instead wanted him to continue his training. I know. I'm a considerate elder. Duque played with Jaina's Mount Hyjal fondly. Hey master, aren't you afraid that William will really slip up and get killed? Duque stopped and hugged Jaina's waist instead. I'm afraid. But I'm more afraid that William will grow into a useless person. In this increasingly chaotic era, every kingdom needed a wise leader. A useless king would only lead a kingdom to destruction. Moreover, I've seen fragments of William's future in the river of time. Is fate unchangeable? Jaina's voice was almost a whisper. Well, fate has changed a lot and it will change any time in the future. But I have to take the gamble. Only then will I be worthy of His Majesty Lang Rin's nurturing and trust. Just like how I treated you in the beginning, I know that His Majesty Daelin only wants you to be a good duchess or queen, but I feel that it would be a great waste of your talent and ability. So I didn't treat you like a canary in a cage and instead sent you out to Theramore. Look, aren't you living a very fulfilling life now? Thank you, Duque, I love you. Jaina stretched her neck and turned her head to give Duque a passionate kiss. Chapter 1107. In the arena, the battle had begun. To the public, William, who was a nameless person, was the first to launch a charge at the defending champion. William's charge was very unique. Normally, a warrior's charge would lock onto a target, and then use the warrior's unique fury ability to charge towards that target. However, halfway through his charge, William used his extraordinary senses to detect the orc sword sage who was in a state of stealth. He immediately switched to intercept, and charged towards him. Bam! It was a clash of flesh against flesh and strength against strength. It was a clash without any fancy moves. William, who was waving his swords, not only knocked the orc sword sage out of stealth, but he also used hamstring break in one go. Well done. During the days that William had been a slave gladiator, his fellow gladiator partner, the high elf bandit Valilla Sagunnar, suddenly jumped out of stealth. She raised her hands, and the two daggers in her hands that emitted a scarlet aura were already waving at the back of the orc shaman, who was the healer, at a speed that was hard to see with the naked eye. Sneak attack. Backstab. Cleave. 5-star eviscerate. If one were to look at the sequence of attacks, Valilla was undoubtedly the worst bandit. That was because she only cared about dealing damage and had forgotten to control the enemy's healer. If one were to consider her shocking attack frequency of 5 skills in a second, as well as her extremely efficient use of energy, that was impossible for ordinary bandits, it was not difficult to understand her choice. While William was still fighting with the sword sage, while their druid bearskin was still transforming into a bear and fighting with the opponent's warrior, the defending champion's healer, the shaman, was already dead on the ground in just 3 seconds. Baylor. Healer. The orc sword sage was suffering from William's suppression. He had seen powerful warriors as well as warriors who were fast and agile, but he had never seen a powerhouse like William who had such a perfect combination of strength, speed, and agility. William brandished his swords and created a sword net that resembled a torrential storm. He had the insane speed of a violent warrior and the dexterity of a weapon warrior. What was more frightening was that the sword sage realized that William's parrying skills were equally proficient in the few times he counterattacked. The sword sage was on the verge of breaking down. He realized that he was dealing with a super monster that was proficient in all 3 elements: berserk, weapon, and defense. However, this monster had a stronger fighting spirit than the orcs. Unsurprisingly, the Beastman Sword Saint only lived 2 seconds longer than his shaman companion before following in his companion's footsteps. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Vale Era firmly believed that William would be able to kill the sword sage. Hence, after dealing with the shaman, she dashed towards the remaining orc warrior. Unexpectedly, Brol Bearmantle, a druid who specialized in the wild, was suppressed by the orc warrior. The orc's blood-red battle axe had some kind of evil special effect that absorbed the enemy's life force. The sharp axe would always be able to break through the tough skin of the druid who had turned into a bear, and cause considerable damage to Brol. The orc warrior realized that he couldn't catch up to William and Vale Era, so he killed Brol with a series of moves. After Vale Era became invisible, she activated Sprint and dashed over using Sneak Attack on the orc warrior. However, the effect wasn't very good. The opponent was immune to a large number of control skills in his berserk state. What was worse was that the opponent switched positions in the next instant, and continued to chase after Brawl while activating Counter Storm. This made Veil Era feel like a mouse trying to pull a tortoise. I'll do it. At this moment, William descended from the sky like a god. He used a gorgeous leap slash to teach the Orc Warrior a lesson. The Orc Warrior, who couldn't take the opportunity to kill Brawl in an instant, was forced to a dead end in a 3-on-1 situation. As expected, when Veil Era used the 5-star kidney strike and stabbed the Orc Warrior in the back, the Orc Warrior's body was instantly destroyed. That was a kidney, a man's most important internal organ. Just like that, the Orc Warrior was torn into pieces by the bloody and brutal Veil Era. Of course, there was no need to mourn for this. Just as the Orc Warrior was paralyzed on the spot from the pain and paralysis, William's 2 long swords formed a cross and pierced the arteries and veins in the Orc's neck. In the next second, he waved his 2 swords and a green head the size of a basket flew into the sky. The battle was over. The MC's roar reverberated through the entire arena through a sound amplification spell. A new champion has been born. Let us congratulate them. Now this black-haired young man has led his team to become the champion of the Hammer of Doom Arena. He has obtained the great title of Ghost Wolf. That's right. This nameless human powerhouse, from this moment onwards, his name is the Great Logosh. 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 The audience went crazy, especially those who had bet on William's team who had won. They held onto the tickets in their hands tightly, waved their fists and screamed. In the VIP room, Jaina looked surprised. The title of Ghost Wolf. This time William is going to be famous all over the world. Duque hugged Jaina and smiled. In the past, the current chief of the tribe, Thrall, was also a famous champion gladiator in Lordaeron. Now William has also obtained the title of champion gladiator. Don't you think it's very funny? Hey, Duque, why do you have to groom William? It's actually quite good for you to be the leader of the alliance. Jaina asked a question that had been hidden in her heart for a long time. Duque shook his head. I groom William just like how Lothar groomed me. There is no conflict between us. I have wisdom, foresight, and powerful magic power. However, I still lack faith, a strong spirit, and willpower. This is what I've been through. Furthermore, I don't know when I'll be forced to leave again. Don't you think that the alliance needs double insurance? Jaina stopped talking and gently rubbed her smooth face against Duque's. Duque sighed in his heart. This couldn't be helped. This was inseparable from his experience of learning about animals before he was 20 years old. A good young man who had accepted materialism really couldn't accept idealism. He would never be able to have such a pure spirit of chivalry like the natives of Azeroth, nor would he run to believe in gods. The alliance needed at least 2 flags. One was practical and the other was spiritual. Duque at least hoped that William would become a benchmark for the spirit of chivalry after he grew up. Chapter 1108. We've won. Vala put her arm around William's shoulder without hesitation, happily drinking the wine that they normally wouldn't see. That was a fine High Elves wine from the Quel'Thalas era. Now that Sindorii was being rebuilt, the supply of all luxury goods was suspended, so this fine wine called Sidira could be said to be a rare treasure. We're the champions. Brawl was also very excited. He raised a large cup of nectar. Ever since he had been imprisoned as a gladiator slave, he had not tasted anything that fit the teachings of the Druids for a long time. Every day it was either hard black bread that could knock one's teeth off, or barbecued meat that tasted barbaric. Yes. It was leftovers from the previous night. Now that they were the champions, their damned master Ryga was finally treating them better. Yo John Doe. Oh no, we should call you Rogosh now. My dear Rogosh, why are you still so sad? Is it because we haven't regained our freedom? Vala comforted William. It's okay. Ryga may be a bastard, but at least he supports us in making money. If we can defend our title in the next tournament, we'll have enough money to redeem ourselves. Yes, that's right. Brawl also comforted William. He even tugged on the kryptonite collar around his neck that symbolized his status as a slave. Their current master, Ryga Earthfury, was born in Draenor. When he was young, his clan was wiped out by the ogres during the war. Ryga was captured and trained as a warrior. As a powerful warrior, Raiga and the Orc army passed through the Black Gate and participated in the invasion of Azeroth. He was eventually captured. After escaping from the captive camp, he became a gladiator, and after earning money to redeem himself, he became a slave owner. He used his savings to purchase an Orc warrior from the Blackrock clan, Blood-Eye Redfist, a Night Elf druid, Brawl Baremantle, and theoretically a Blood Elf thief, Valilla Sanguiner. They were active in famous arenas such as the Hammer of Misfortune and the Ring of Blood. After Blood-Eye died in battle, he began to look for a new gladiator. Thus he picked up William, who was unconscious on the beach of Du Roter. Faced with his companion's consolation, William smiled bitterly. "No, I'm not in the least worried about freedom. I'm just still confused. Even though I won the gladiatorial championship, I still can't remember who I am." Memory loss was a rather unsolvable problem, and Vale Era and Brawl did not have a good solution either. They could only console William. "You will have the chance to get your memories back in the future." At the same time, Rieger Earthfury was reveling in his private room. Money. So much money. I knew that they would become my cash cow. Liga laughed wildly, dumping dozens of chests of gold coins on the floor of the room, rolling on the ground a few times before excitedly rushing to the bed and hugging a very beautiful orc girl in his eyes. The orc girl's clothes were half exposed and her eyes were already flirtatious. Just as he was about to celebrate with the orc girl, a terrible sound of destruction came from the wall behind him. Hua! It wasn't a loud sound, but the wall behind him was suddenly blasted open by the flames, and a 4-meter-tall, 3-meter-wide door appeared. It wasn't an explosion, but an ultra-high-temperature flame that instantly burned the wall made of hard granite into ashes. Only dust and some glass-like melts were left on the ground. A beautiful black-haired female thief and an equally beautiful radiant moon elven wizard entered. They were obviously very powerful, but they wore maid uniforms and walked through the door first. When the female elven wizard walked past, a visible frost aura spread rapidly on the ground, extinguishing the heat wave brought about by the flames in an instant. Then she used the frost elements to condense a dazzling white carpet on the ground. They were carrying magic lanterns that were gold and red that were not sold on the market, and were obviously from the royal family of Kuel Salis. They stood on the left and right sides of the room. Then a young human man in a blue and white mage robe walked into the room with a blonde human mage wearing a crown and the same blue and white robe. "Hello. I'm Duque. I'm Duke Marcus. Next to me is Queen Jaina Proudmoore." Actually, Liga could recognize Duque even if he didn't introduce himself. As an old warrior who had experienced the first and second battles at the Dark Portal and fought against Duque many times, Liga would recognize Duque's demon-like face that had sent millions of orcs to hell. Pushing away the orc woman in his arms who was so frightened that she couldn't speak, Liga rolled off the bed pathetically and knelt on the spot. He was no longer the brave and fearless warrior of the past. His previous life as a captive and a gladiator had taught him what respect and obedience was. Duke Marcus was recognized by both the Alliance and the Horde as the strongest person in the Alliance. He was the commander of the Alliance, the Storm Duke, and a man with power that could overturn the world. Why would such a man come here to find a small slave master like him? At this thought, Liga suddenly remembered the amnesiac young warrior who had just made a lot of money for him. "Do you know who you've imprisoned and used as a slave gladiator?" "I don't know." Liga knelt on the ground, shaking his head non-stop. He had guessed a little, but he definitely couldn't admit it because once he did he would definitely die. "Garrosh is the king of the Stormwind Kingdom, Varian Rin, whom I serve." As the angry voice fell, Liga was sent flying by a powerful arcane impact, and he was imprinted on the wall. The surging bluish-purple magic was like a solid substance, suppressing him as if it wanted to press his whole body into the granite wall. "No. Spare me. Spare me." Liga was in a difficult situation. He never would have thought that his money tree was a big pit. He had actually picked up a king to be his slave. It was fine if he was a slave. If he hadn't been discovered and was secretly sent back, it would have been a great achievement. Now everything was over. The strongest mortal in the world, Duke Marcus, had come to find him. Liga was so scared that he almost **t himself. Just when he thought he was going to die for sure, the magic that was pouring into his body suddenly disappeared. Duque's voice rang in his ears again, You should go to hell without a doubt. But seeing that you've made Varian grow to my surprise, I'll give you one last chance. I need you to put on a show for me. Chapter 1109. As the owner of the arena, he naturally hoped that the gladiatorial matches would not stop throughout the year, but it was obvious that this was impossible. Rich people could not possibly stay here 365 days a year. Similarly, gladiators would also have injuries and need to rest. Magic could temporarily heal wounds, but it was impossible to replenish lost blood or repair deeper injuries. Most wounds could only be healed with time. Staying in a place like Farila's that was filled with blood and violence would only prevent the gladiators from getting enough rest. Hence, according to the rules of the Hammer of Misfortune, the remaining gladiators would be sent somewhere to recuperate after the final gladiator champions emerged every winter. As a famous slave owner of the arena, Liga was very close to the Torrens of Thunder Cliff. Hence, after this season's gladiatorial matches ended, he would send his victorious teams to Thunder Cliff as usual. These are magic shackles. Apart from preventing you from leaving the carriage, you can maintain a certain amount of freedom, Liga instructed before he left. In the spacious carriage, William, Valilla, and Brawl could get almost any delicacy they wanted. During the journey, as long as they had a request, they just had to instruct the escorts and someone would rush over to fulfill it. This was because behind their chariot, which looked like an Azeroth version of a cash carrier, there were two other chariots, both filled with food and drinks. Brawl Bearskin took a sip of nectar. What a pity. This isn't true freedom. Valilla's eyes flickered and she waved the magic shackles on her wrists. Liga won't give us a chance. These are top-grade magic shackles. Unless the two legendary Breaking Dawn archmages, Duque and Ronin, ordinary Radiant Moon wizards can't break them by force. Sigh, we're his cash cow. Let's think about how we're going to defend our title next year. Duque. William shuddered when he heard this name. He felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. He raised his head abruptly. Valera, say the names of those two Breaking Dawn wizards again. Ronin. No, the former one. William was extremely nervous. The strongest human wizard, Breaking Dawn Archmage Duke Marcus. What's wrong? Logosh? Heavens. I remember this name. That's right. I have a very deep impression of this name. Varian covered his head with both hands. Of course, we all have an impression of him because he was a legendary hero and commander of the Alliance, even though he went missing. Brohl said. No, the latest news is that he has just returned at the end of December. As a thief, Valera's ears were sharper, but I don't think Duque's return will affect our fate in any way, so I didn't say anything. Brawl nodded in agreement at Valera's words. No, that's not it. That Duque and I aren't strangers who look up to each other but don't know each other. My heart told me that I knew him. I have a very close relationship with Duke Marcus. That's right. He was above his friends. Oh, my son's Christian name is also Duque. Wait a minute. My son? I have a son. The throbbing that came from the deepest part of his soul triggered a certain nerve in William. He was like a traveler who was about to die of thirst in the desert, suddenly grasping his last hope. That was an oasis in his soul that could save him. Even after so many years of hard work as a gladiator, the battles between life and death did not destroy him, was because William longed to be able to recover his memories and find his life. This was the only pillar of support he had when he was in the most pain and lost. Now it was as if he had unraveled the fog and found his direction. How could William not be overjoyed? You have a son. Valera and Brawl were shocked at the same time, then overjoyed. Have you recovered your memories? Valera asked in surprise. No, William was at a loss again, but his intuition, which had been honed from countless battles in the gladiator arena, felt that his judgment was not wrong. I didn't recall everything, but I feel that after I find that Duke Marcus, I will remember more things. It's not difficult to find him. He's the Grand Duke of Stormwind. Valera was only halfway through her sentence when William was touched again. Stormwind City. Yes. I remember something again. I remember Stormwind City. It's a city of alternating blue and white. My God. Tell me about Stormwind City. Night Elf Brawl was completely clueless about Stormwind City, but Valera was different. She could be considered a blood elf. After Arthas destroyed Kuel Salis and polluted the Sunwell, she was ostracized by her people because she could barely belong to Prince Kael, that's faction. In addition, the entire Long Song forest was in a mess. Valeera, who had lost confidence in her hometown, began her wandering life, which was why she was caught and became a slave gladiator. Before that, if there were any major events in the High Elf Society that would not change for thousands of years, the biggest would be Duque seducing the Ranger General Aurelia. From then on, Duque, who was a human duke from the southernmost part of the continent, Stormwind, entered the sights of the High Elves. Valeera knew a lot about Stormwind City. As she explained, William's eyes lit up. Then the Iron Triangle of the Gladiator Arena decided on an escape plan. They were prepared to find a way to escape to the only human territory on this continent, Theramore. Finally, they would find a way to find a ship that was willing to ferry them back to Stormwind City. They waited for 4 whole days before they found an opportunity. The Feralas region could not directly reach Mogor's Thunder Cliff. The safer way was to go east through the Thousand Needles, then north to the southern part of the Barren Lands, and finally west to the peaceful and lush Mogor region. In the Thousand Needle Forest, Brawl thought of a way to attract a large pack of wolves, and very coincidentally he also accidentally attracted an even more powerful rare elite wyvern Hatras. While the guards were in chaos, William forcefully smashed the magical formation on the roof of the carriage with his sword despite the recoil of his magic. Fortunately, the magic formation had not been repaired for a long time, so the backlash was not too strong. Otherwise, William's right arm would have been blown off. On a stone pillar in the Thousand Needles that looked like a tall tower, Duke and Jaina quietly watched the trio who had snatched 3 horses and charged forward, killing their way through the forest and leaving a trail of blood behind them. "Why did you go through so much trouble?" Jaina asked. "Young people. Only when you fight for it with your life will you learn to cherish it." Chapter 11:10. Indeed. I can take William back directly and activate the next step of the plan to let William recover as soon as possible. If I can deal with the Black Dragon Princess, then the result will be that the great hero of the Alliance, Duke Marcus, has once again foiled the evil plot. Let's refresh my reputation that can't be upgraded. I've proven myself again, but what about Varian? Gianna was suddenly speechless. Yes. What about William? Perhaps from now on, William would become the cowardly person in the eyes of the people, the little king who couldn't even protect himself and needed the help of the older generation, Duque. The people might say, at the crucial moment Sir Marcus is still reliable. Then what? Would William, who was already in his 20s, once again play the role of the weak person who was protected under the wings of Duque and the other seniors? Duque continued to explain his point of view. History has proven to us time and time again that having a great teacher alone is not enough to produce a truly outstanding student. Take Arthas for example. Back then he learned from Uther, the greatest paladin in the entire alliance. However, he who had never experienced any setbacks and tribulations, was tempted by evil because of his stubbornness and prejudice. He made mistakes step by step which led to the complete fall of his soul. At the end of the day it was because he had never suffered before. His path had been too smooth. Gianna fell silent at the mention of Arthas. Gianna had once looked forward to meeting Arthas. But fate had missed them, so they were only childhood friends. Even so, Arthas's fall still touched her greatly. She chose to listen quietly. A person cannot be tempered by good times. Blindly protecting him is actually harming him and not really doing it for his own good. Duque sighed. Facing the Calamity army that can expand its army infinitely, the foundation of the Alliance is still too weak. It can't withstand any torment. We can't even give William a few thousand soldiers to torment. At most we can let him feel the atmosphere of the battlefield. That's already the limit. I've secretly checked. William is now in a strange state where his soul is split, but his body is being duplicated and split into 2. It was rare that in this state he could cast aside the aura of a king and experience life and death as an ordinary person. He could experience what friendship was, and he could taste the things that he could not learn while sitting on the throne. How could I possibly interrupt his growth? If he can recover, this rare gladiator experience will become one of the most precious treasures in his life. Valeera and Brawl would also become his most capable helpers in overcoming the obstacles in the future. This is also the best training for William that I can do for Lang and Andoin. Duque's words shook Jaina to the core. She had never thought that Duque would put so much thought into it. It could be said that it was because of Anduin Lothar and Lang Rin's trust that Duque could rise like a comet and become the brightest star in the sky. Along the way, Duque, who had achieved success and almost controlled the entire alliance, did not abandon Stormwind, which had nurtured him. Instead, he used this roundabout method to nurture a better and more outstanding king for Stormwind. Putting oneself in someone else's shoes, one should repay kindness with kindness. Indeed, this is the Duque that I'm infatuated with. Jaina's heart was a little infatuated. Unfortunately, she and Duque were not the only ones here at the moment. Duque's words were not for her to hear. 5 meters behind Duque, a figure bowed to Duque and said, "I admire your foresight and effort, Grand Duke. I will convey your words to Regent for Dragon. Matthias Shaw, you just have to be careful not to let irrelevant people enter His Majesty Varian's trial field. Keep a distance of at least half a day from them, and pay special attention to Valilla Sagunnar. Her skills are not inferior to yours." Matthias was the head of Storm City's MI7, and the head of intelligence that had been deeply trusted by the Storm royal family ever since King Lang. This time it was he who had been sent by Bolivar to oversee the affair. On the surface he reported directly to Bolivar, but someone as smart as Matthias, of course, knew who the real boss of Storm City was. In front of Duque, he also knew that he could not become Duque's confidant, but he still meticulously completed every order from Duque. This was good for him, for Bolivar, and for Stormwind. After bowing his head and agreeing, Matthias' figure disappeared into thin air. "Gianna, enough is enough with your acting. No king wants to be deceived or fooled. Once William arrives at Theramore, or if the people we sent to follow him are discovered, show yourself and tell William the truth. Understood? And after that? After that, it's time to prepare the Valentine's Day plan." The Valentine's Day plan was, of course, a large-scale plan. If Duque did not say it, no one would have thought that Duque would do this. Of course, that was not Jaina's main point. "Back then I thought that Valentine's Day was specially set up for me. You even made me wait for you for a full 10 years, from a young girl to an old lady." Jaina put her hands on her hips, looking angry. Old lady? Where is that?" The bastard Duque made a gesture of looking into the distance, pretending not to see. "There is only an eternal beauty around me, the 18-year-old Queen Kurtiras who will not age." "What old lady? I really don't see her." If Jaina was really the old princess who had waited for Duque for more than 10 years and became an auntie, Jaina would probably really flip out. Life was eternal and age no longer had any meaning. With eternal life, one's appearance and body would be fixed at the peak of the human body at 18 years old. In the end, their appearance was getting older and older. In the past few years, Jaina and Lucia even had to secretly put on makeup to make themselves look more mature. Perhaps this was also a kind of blissful worry. He did not know how to continue lying in the future, but for the time being, Duque's remedial measures still made Jaina unable to be angry. After a gentle kiss, Jaina left. It was mid-January and more news began to spread within the borders of Stormwind. After nearly 2 weeks of discussion among the nobles finally launched a counterattack against Duke under the leadership of Countess Katrana and Risto after Duke's promotion of the feudal lord's power. After several meetings with King Varian, who was sitting in Stormwind Fortress like a fool, the muddle-headed King Varian suddenly announced that the nobles' fiefs were sacred and inviolable. If he wanted to weaken the power of the vassals, it would be a challenge to his and the entire human world's royal authority. He hoped that Duque would retract his decision, or else he would have to consider Duque's Grand Duke status. Chapter 11:11. This was like a stone that caused 1,000 ripples. In this era, although there were many incidents that affected the dignity of the royal family, the biggest one being Arthas patricide, the deeply rooted royal power that had been around for more than 2,800 years still deeply affected the majority of the people. They blindly believed in the king and firmly believed that it was right and proper for them to serve the king and his lord. Hence, the matter of righteousness and reputation was rather important. Back then, Lang and Andoin had discussed that if Duque wanted to establish his own country, they would allow Duque to do so. That was something that was only known to the small circle of the highest echelons of the kingdom. Later, when Lang died, the last words he left behind said that Duque had the right to dismiss the king. In the hearts of the people, this was more like a performance of Lang's fairness and modesty. No one thought about how people would react if Duque really fulfilled the terms. The people only knew how powerful their own Grand Duke Duque was, and all their pride was based on Stormwind. In the past 20 years, Duque and Lang had been intentionally or unintentionally made into a close monarch and subject. Duque was even described as the most loyal subject in the world. Although Duque had always been self-conscious, it still had a certain degree of restraint on Duque. This was the problem of image. Now that the current King William had made such a declaration, it was definitely disadvantageous to Duque. At the end of the day, Duque was still William's subject in name. If Duque said that he wanted to limit the power of the nobles, the king would say that he would not give it to them. Once a fight broke out, it would not be a blessing in Stormwind no matter what. At least in terms of public opinion, the direction of public opinion had become a little chaotic. In the secret room of Storm Fortress, Bolvar apologized to Duque profusely. I'm sorry, Duque. It's my fault. But I really can't think of any way to stop them from meeting His Majesty. His Majesty is also soft-hearted. I don't know why he suddenly agreed to make such a declaration. Sigh, I'll go and persuade His Majesty again. Duque grabbed Bolvar. There's no need to go. I don't care about what His Majesty does. As long as you don't have to worry about the grudge you have against me, I'll be happy. Grudge. Bolvar sat down dejectedly. Alright, I have to admit that after you returned I had some complaints about you in my heart. When the late king was assassinated, Lothar and I were the ones holding the fort. Of course, I know that you are trapped outside for the Alliance and even for this world, but I still feel a little uncomfortable. Yes, I'm sorry. I've been neglecting the development of Stormwind for the past few years. Duque sighed. Please forgive me. After you returned, I was angry with you. After all, I was thinking that if you were here, this wouldn't have happened. Now that I think about it, I was actually looking for excuses for my incompetence. Bolvar was still the same Bolvar who was hailed as the role model of a holy knight. Duque gently patted Bolvar on the shoulder. Everyone has their own strengths and weaknesses. Don't give yourself too much pressure. Anyway, now, the other king variant has been found and ensured safe. Then what do we do with the two kings now? Duque had a headache. The historical variants split up and then merged back into one. There was a rather unscientific logic to it. The Princess of the Black Dragon's attack patterns were so diverse. How could he determine that it was a spell that could restore Varian's original appearance, and not the famous, deep breath? In reality, there wouldn't be such an eye-catching notification like, Onyxia took a deep breath. Who knew if it was a big breath of dragon breath or just a normal breath of turbid air? After all, Duque had only let the 4 Dragon Kings take the lead and finish off the Wings of Death the last time. Duque did not have the experience of fighting a demigod-level dragon. Many things could only be tried once. With the system's data, he would be able to make a more accurate judgment. Duque pondered for a while and finally said, "This is an evil spell. The fastest and most convenient way is to find the caster. Fortunately, we all know where she is. This is also the reason why I've been secretly carrying out that plan ever since I returned." Bolvar's eyes lit up, but then he thought of something. There's another problem. Regarding Her Majesty's declaration. Duque smiled mysteriously. To destroy it, one must first make it mad. During this period, as long as I don't die, you don't have to worry about me. Bolvar thought of the nobles who had gathered around the Princess of the Black Dragon like sharks that had smelled blood, and he couldn't help but grimace. On the 20th of January, Duque was summoned by King Varian to the Storm Fortress and engaged in a heated debate with the conservative nobles in front of the king. The topic revolved around the vassals' rights and duties and even royal authority. Royal authority. Her Majesty's authority is bestowed by the heavens. It is sacred and inviolable. Her Majesty extends her authority according to the will of the heavens. The nobles are Her Majesty's arms and fingers. So the noble's authority is sacred and inviolable. Countess Katrana sanctified the noble's authority from the very beginning. Royal authority is not innate. Without Thoradin the Great struggle 2,800 years ago, there would not be the Arathar Empire, and there would not be the 7 kingdoms. Moreover, the Irather Empire has already perished, as has the Stromgard Kingdom, one of the 7 kingdoms. Duque retorted. That's because the heavens withdrew their blessings on these 2 kingdoms. Duke Marcus, do you dare to say that there are no gods in this world? Katrana's words were sharp. Generally speaking, the debate between idealism and materialism was nonsense. Neither could convince the other. In a situation where science was not sufficiently developed, it would be a disaster if idealism led the conversation in a direction that could not be proven by materialism. It was a pity that this was Azeroth, a world where souls could be seen with the naked eye, and where even gods frequently appeared. Although humans did not believe in the goddess of the moon, Elun, most of them knew of her existence. In addition to the existence of mysterious people like mages, warlocks, and priests, the result was that the royal authority theory was very popular. As soon as Katrana finished speaking, all the nobles, including the neutral knights, could not help but nod. Duque did not have any good ideas in the debate. He could only explain his position from the different demands of the new era nobles on the progress of society and the development of productivity. For example, the impact of banning the circulation of goods and increasing the circulation cost on society. Unfortunately, such things were believable and everyone knew that it was right. However, breaking the chain of interests of the old interest groups was a huge matter that would make the nobles jump in anger. It's good that you, Duque, help us earn money. But if you take back the money that you give us every year, then you, Duque, will become our enemy. Moreover, that cowardly William was probably under mind control now. Whatever Duque said, William would always respond with a tortoise recite scriptures, and not listen. Chapter 11-12. In terms of combat, Duque could single-handedly wipe out all the nobles except for a certain princess. In terms of arguing, Duque was confident that he wouldn't lose to anyone on the other side. The most detestable thing in the world was that the referee was biased. Previously, for the sake of ease of control, William, who was only left with a cowardly personality, had become a silly mascot for a long period of time. Now, in order to obtain victory in the realm of the nobles, the Princess of the Black Dragon was playing with mental dominance. William, who was sitting on the throne, said in a weak voice, "Respected Grand Duke Marcus, I also want Stormwind to be stronger and more fertile. Unfortunately, your views have shaken the foundation of the entire kingdom. I cannot agree with you." "Your Majesty, Duque looked like he still wanted to argue. "Sir Marcus, who gave you the right to interrupt His Majesty's speech?" On the surface, it seemed like Katrana's Princess of the Black Dragon was showing off her power. Her speech immediately gained the support of the nobles. Duque could only sullenly shut his mouth. The weak version of William continued, "The nobles are the foundation of the kingdom. If the foundation is destroyed, the kingdom will no longer exist. Your proposal to restrict the nobles' power is equivalent to destroying the foundation. If I agree, I won't have the face to meet the late king and Uncle Anduin after I die." Hearing this, even though Duque knew that this fellow was a puppet, he just wanted to cover his face and spit at William. "Damn it, I really want to show these nobles why the flowers are so red. At the same time, I can press this amusing version of William's head in front of Lang's grave to wake him up." However, for the sake of the plan, Duque could only pretend to be obedient. "Your Majesty." Duque strengthened his tone. As expected, Duque was ignored by the weak version of William. He continued to recite, "Dear Marcus, I can understand your original intention of wanting our kingdom to be strong and prosperous. But this time, I'm not only going to reject your proposal. I'm also going to reduce your territory as a warning. Please forgive me, Duke Marcus. I must set an example for the world's aristocrats, a role model. That is, the innate royal power. The aristocratic power is also an extension of the royal power." Not only was Duque a little stunned by these words, even Bolvar, who had always maintained a neutral stance, was dumbfounded. What was face-slapping? This was a slap in the face. Generally speaking, as long as one did not commit treason, the king had no right to reduce the fief of his vassals. Now, Duque had proposed to reduce the power of the nobles, but Duque had raised this issue publicly during the annual meeting due to internal conflicts. Treason was definitely out of the question. If he were to reduce his title, it would be a little too much. Of course, the reason was also reasonable. More importantly, Bolvar knew that the timid William's mind was being manipulated, but he didn't dare to do so. For a moment even an honest man like Bolvar was on the point of flying off the handle. Duque's thoughts were also spinning rapidly. At his position he was no different from a king. But as long as he still acknowledged his position as a vassal of the House of Rin, he would definitely be at an absolute disadvantage politically. No, it should be said that in a sense even if he were to be reduced by 1 square meter, it would be a slap in the face. The key now was how big Xianxia's appetite was. If her appetite was small and only wanted to create Stormwind conflicts, she could let this puppet William announce that all of his fief would be reduced. This left Duque with 3 choices. First, he could expose her true colors and start a fight in Stormwind Fortress, just like in history. This would feel good, but the problem was that he would not be able to punish the nobles who supported her as he lacked crucial evidence. Second, Duque could pinch his nose and accept it, but this would obviously be a huge blow to Duque's reputation. Third, Duque could rebel and declare independence. If Duque did not know that Katrana was the princess of the Black Dragons, he might have really done this. Doing so after knowing would definitely be the dumbest choice. If her appetite was average, she would only want William to symbolically reduce Duque's territory by 1 village. With this as a compromise, she would allow her forces to invade Duque's territory and seek a deeper infiltration. Of course, what Duque hoped the most was that the princess of the Black Dragons had a big appetite, as expected. William spoke. I announce that I will take back all of the Marcus family's territories in the Elven Forest and the Twilight Forest. Almost in an instant, all sorts of emotions appeared in the meeting hall of Stormwind Fortress. There was surprise. There was anger. There was confusion. There was confusion. But more than that, there was anticipation. The nobles waited for Duque's reaction to see how the great hero of the Alliance of Stormwind would react. Were the nobles afraid? Of course they were afraid. If Duque were to kill everyone here in a fit of rage, they would not even have a place to cry. But they were also looking forward to it, longing for it, hoping that if Duque would bow his head and continue to be a good vassal, obligingly providing more wealth to the kingdom for them to squander, that would be the best thing that could happen. The humanoid Xianxia shot a provocative look at Duque. That pair of eyes that were clearly overflowing with mockery and intimidation seemed to be telling Duque, if you do not want to become the public enemy of the nobles in human society, you should pinch your nose and accept it. The best actor Duque. His face was a perfect representation of how a reformer felt when he fell from the clouds of hope into the abyss of pain. Was it anger because he did not strive? Or was it sorrow because he could not get a response from his lord? Anyone could imagine that under that agitated and twitching face, there was a deep rift between him and his lord, William. In the end, Duque still lowered his head. Yes, Your Majesty. These 2 words seemed to be squeezed out from the gaps of his teeth. The meeting ended, and the news of Grand Duke Marcus being reduced in Stormwind spread like wildfire. It caused a tsunami in the alliance. The nobles of Stormwind were originally full of joy and thought that this victory would become a role model for the alliance. They thought that the nobles of various countries would jump out and impose heavy taxes on the trains that passed through their territories. However, there were no ripples. In particular, the queens of various countries publicly declared that if Stormwind treated Duque unfairly, they were willing to give a Grand Duke's territory in their kingdom to Duque. What made the nobles even more unprepared was that even though William, under the instructions of a certain dragon, had given all the confiscated territories to the nobles who had supported Duque as a reward for the political battle, their income didn't increase but declined instead. This was because overnight, all the trains stopped passing through their territories. All the train drivers, mainly the dwarves, went on strike and dismantled the locomotives in the name of maintenance. The originally rich daily necessities were all stopped, and all the luxury stores in Stormwind City that were related to the Marcus Merchant Guild refused to sell goods to the conservative nobles. What was worse was that rumors spread everywhere, saying that the nobles wanted to restore the right of the first knight, and the cruel rule of reducing the citizens to serfs, which directly led to the citizens fleeing in large numbers. All of a sudden the nobles were also at a loss. At this time the old butler of the Marcus family, Makarov, came to visit Countess Enristo and handed her a letter. There was only 1 sentence in the letter: Valentine's Day, do you want to meet? Chapter 11-13. Dating. Before Du transmigrated, this was definitely the most ambiguous word in a certain social media app. But at this point in time, it had a very subtle and magical effect. As a black dragon who infiltrated the human world and mingled with the nobles, Xianxia was indeed a strange dragon with high political attributes. It was precisely because she knew that it was impossible to take away all of Duque's fiefs, that she set her sights on the power struggle from the start. The Marcus family's power in Stormwind was not without reason. Firstly, the Marcus family's territory was the largest, and secondly, the Marcus family had a frightening number of ways to make money, and the taxes from their territory only accounted for less than 1% of their total income. It would be too fake if a family that controlled almost all of the kingdom's economic lifelines did not retaliate. Duque's current approach was a classic example of a lose-lose situation. The nobles did indeed control all the railways leading to the Red Ridge Mountains, the Swamp of Sorrows and the Cursed Land. They also claimed that if Duque did not yield, they would continue to raise taxes from 100% tolls without limit. Duque simply did not allow the trains to pass through, nor did he allow any transport vehicles to enter the elven forest. After all, trains had been used in the forest for more than 15 years, and the cheap train transportation had long since destroyed all the traditional horse transportation industries. If not for the fact that the technology to shrink the steam engine had not yet matured, and there were no cars, perhaps even horse carriages would have to leave Stormwind. Currently, horse carriages were mostly responsible for secondary transportation. If they were suddenly asked to bear the heavy burden of long-distance transportation, the amount of transportation was simply a drop in the ocean. Duque's stopping of the train was undoubtedly a blow to the Marcus family's trade, but it also damaged the supplies to the Cursed Land's Overwatch stronghold. The fish from the Red Ridge Mountains and the conversion of the Swamp of Sorrows into farmland were barely enough to meet the needs of the Overwatch stronghold's garrison. But that was during peaceful times. Once war broke out, the army would flood into the Overwatch stronghold, and it would be utterly inadequate. Now, if the Overwatch stronghold wanted to obtain other supplies, it had to pass through the dock set up at the Reed Coast. But there was another problem. There was the Temple of Hacker in the middle of the Swamp of Sorrows, an area that Duque had strictly forbidden to explore. Therefore, the passage from the northern part of the Swamp of Sorrows to the Reed Coast dock was not completely safe. Therefore, the high toll of the nobles would definitely not last for long. If the Overwatch stronghold, the Alliance's greatest defense system, was damaged, Duque could use his status as the Alliance's commander-in-chief to push down the huge hat of damaging the Overwatch stronghold's defense system and allowing demons into the world of Azeroth, and the nobles would have to bear the consequences. The current Storm nobles were much cleaner than the ones from the first year of the Dark Portal. Unfortunately, it was still not clean enough. Back then, Duque had used the Bloodsail pirates to exterminate the nobles, but failed to obtain Lang's full support. As a result, he had left behind a trail. When Duque had gone missing twice, Lang had allowed quite a number of noble descendants to inherit the main family and restore their family names. Perhaps it was out of the mentality of compensation, or perhaps it was because he felt that the meeting hall was too empty. It was just that Lang had never thought that after his and Lothar's deaths, the restoration of the aristocratic forces would be so fierce. Moreover, as the regent, Bolvar was also a great noble. As a result, a new batch of parasites was born. These fellows did not have the courage to go head-to-head with Duque. From their point of view, as long as they kept their power, Duque would still be able to give them the toll, and that would be perfect. After Duque's actions caused both sides to suffer, the voices of the conservatives asking for peace also became prevalent. The nobles all told Katrana to stop while she was ahead. The Black Dragon Princess was here to cause trouble, and before she had completely seized the highest power in Stormwind, she did not want to shed all pretense of cordiality. Therefore, from her point of view, Duque was using the excuse of a Valentine's Day date to ask for peace. A good excuse. It also suits his identity as the Duke of Chastising. The Black Dragon Princess, who had transformed into Katrana, smiled faintly. A few dukes came up to her. Then, "Enristo, what are you going to do?" "Date? Of course I will go. The essence of politics is to compromise. Since there is no benefit to either side, peace talks are the only way out. If Grand Duke Marcus is willing to give up his queen's lovers, and the price is high enough, how about I marry him?" "Haha. If he only found out that I was a dragon on his wedding night and I tore him apart, the great hero of the alliance with only half of his body left. That expression would be great. Onyxia's evil and charming smile was seen by the nobles as having a card up her sleeve. The stagnation of the logistics caused a considerable degree of chaos within the kingdom, but there were two places that were not affected. One was the Western Wilderness, where the railway was still supplying supplies to the pioneering army that was developing the territory in Stranglethorn Vale. The second was Stormwind City. Although the supplies that were supposed to be transported to the Elven Forest were all piled up in the warehouses of Gold's Higher Town, the supplies supplied to Stormwind City were still there. It seemed that the upcoming Valentine's Day event on the 14th of February was not affected at all. The army continued the tradition of more than 10 years, routinely giving all soldiers who were not on urgent missions or on guard duty a holiday. A large number of soldiers in civilian clothes poured into the streets of Stormwind City, dressed up with a few months' worth of military pay in their hands, so that it was convenient to express their love, or directly buy gifts for their girlfriends that they had not seen for a while. As one of the large-scale series of activities to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the Alliance, Stormwind City held a big event on Valentine's Day this year. The Marcus family took advantage of their developed marine products to have the Nagas bring a large number of incomparably beautiful giant corals and shells from the bottom of the sea, and then specially made a lover's island in the center of the Mirror Lake outside Stormwind City. It was a hollow man-made island with a zigzag interior. Couples could spend up to 10 silver coins to rent a beautifully decorated two-person boat and row into the caves of Lover's Island. In the deep but well-lit waterway, they could listen to the melodious violin and piano concerto that could be heard all over the island while admiring the decorations on both sides of the waterway that looked like the Dragon Palace in a fairy tale. They could enjoy the romance and warmth. There were a total of 1024 waterways provided to ordinary people, each of which was 300 meters long and had a time limit of 10 minutes. There were 108 waterways provided to the upper class, each of which cost 10 gold coins and had a time limit of 90 minutes. There was also a small private dock at the end of the waterway that could be uploaded, providing all kinds of services. As for the highest grade of waterways, there were only a mere 12, and the fee was even more exorbitant, as high as 1,000 gold coins. He did not know about the others, but in any case as early as 3 days before Valentine's Day, the nobles who used it all said it was good. Chapter 11:14. It was said that the idea came from Duque. It had to be said that Duque's new invention was deeply loved by the nobles. If it wasn't for Duque wanting to deprive them of their power, Duque would have continued to be the most loved person among the nobles of Stormwind City. Zai, who asked Duque to come from a place with an explosion of information. Not to mention the props seen in the 10 terabytes porn. Just the lover boat that Duque made according to the Valentine's Day event in the game had instantly killed the hearts of all the noble girls. It was obviously the simplest sampan, with 2 heart-shaped backrests and red velvet sofa cushions. Then the bowstrings of the sampan were inlaid with a shiny silver iron sheet similar to silver. The bow and stern of the sampan were elegantly curved, with a heart-shaped pendant hanging from each of them. They were even made of red glass. The whole set only cost around 10 silver coins. Adding the corals and shells in the sea to make a large island, the lowest fee was 10 silver coins. One had to know that apart from labor, everything else was free. You had an idea. The Valentine's Day event in Stormwind City was open to the commoners, and it could earn at least tens of thousands of gold coins. Moreover, the top waterways were almost fully booked the moment they were released. Except for one. On the night of February 14th, this was a day that caused unlimited damage to single dogs. It was useless to be handsome if he couldn't get a date. He might as well go to the hospital for a vasectomy. Countess Katrana Anristo pretended to be low-key as she arrived at the Mirror Lake. As soon as her carriage arrived at the lake, it caused a commotion. It's Countess Anristo. I heard that she will soon be promoted to a marquis by His Majesty. She's so beautiful. Oh my God. Who is she going on a date with? Our Stormwind City's rare beauty is finally going to fall. Who is it? Who is it? However, the person who appeared in front of Countess Anristo made the nobles beat their chests and stomp their feet. It was an old butler with braided silver hair, a well-groomed appearance and a black tuxedo. Everyone recognized him as the Marcus family's butler, Makarov. He, who used to be the head of a small mercenary group, had already served the Marcus family for 20 years. His mercenary temperament had already faded and was replaced by a dignified etiquette that countless veteran aristocrats had no choice but to approve of, as well as a graceful bearing that surpassed many lesser aristocrats. He gently invited the countess down, and slowly led the countess to the side, which was also the largest pier. When the countess' figure disappeared behind the wooden wall outside the dock, countless male nobles' hearts broke. Another peerless beauty was about to fall? Oh no. Just as the elders in the family had said, Countess Anristo was here to negotiate. On the small dock, Katrana looked at the empty love boat and frowned. There was nothing wrong with this special crystal boat. Under the inlaid silver crystal pieces, the entire boat was like a work of art, appearing extremely beautiful. The swan head and the neck of the ship's bow could easily arouse the maiden heart of any woman. However, the protagonist was not here. Since she was here for a date, she could not bring her staff like she did on other occasions. Today in her right hand was a folding fan embellished with black velvet. On the surface, Countess Anristo was still a powerful radiant moon mage. The countess opened the folding fan, fanned herself and asked unhappily, "Where is your master? Making a lady wait is not what a gentleman should do." "I'm here." Accompanied by a slight magical wave, Duque's entire body appeared out of nowhere and appeared behind the countess. When he spoke, he inadvertently breathed out hot air, and it just so happened to be on the countess' slender white neck. This terrible touch gave the Black Dragon Princess goosebumps. For a moment, Onyxia wanted to turn around and give someone a deep breath. What a surprise. The princess, who still had the appearance of a countess, turned around elegantly, and then revealed a formal, no, a horrifying smile that could be classified as a fake smile. Would Duque, who had seen countless women and played the game of infernal affairs with the twins of Erida, be afraid of this? Would the Black Dragon Princess dare to show her draconic aura now? If it was an ordinary mortal, they would not even dare to move when faced with such an oppressive smile. You want to ask Duque if he dared to move? If he dared to move. Of course he dared to move. What kind of person was Duque without integrity? He knew that the Black Dragon Princess was in a bad mood, but he still went forward and stretched his claws towards the waist and thighs of the Black Dragon Princess. There were 3 choices in front of the princess. One was to fall out with Duque and leave angrily, without knowing what kind of price he was going to propose. The second was to submit, but she was in a bad mood, so how could she choose this? So she chose the third. She immediately cast a spell to resist. The white light of frost magic suddenly lit up on her graceful female body. Who knew that Duque's moral integrity would be so low as to use counterspell immediately? I've seen shamelessness, but I've never seen such shamelessness. The Black Dragon Princess' disguised radiant moon magic circuit was obviously not a match for the Breaking Dawn level Duque. Unless she exposed the power of the Black Dragon hidden under the disguise of the magic circuit, she was nothing more than a weak woman who had lost her magic power when all the magic circuits were sealed. And according to his calculations, the Breaking Dawn level counterspell was enough to mess up her magic circuit for 5 minutes. Wait. What are you trying to do? If you mess around, I'm going to scream. Scream all you want. No one will come even if you scream yourself hoarse. Besides, I won't do anything to you. Duque had a mischievous smile on his face as he stretched out his hand. Onyxia felt aggrieved. She didn't want to expose herself, but she also didn't want Duque to have his way. That was impossible. Even if she forcefully lifted her calf and used her fist to hit Duque's head, how could a weak girl like her resist the strength of a grown man? Just like that, Duque carried Onyxia in a standard princess carry, grabbing her by the waist and clasping her thighs. Duke Marcus. Put me down. Put me down. Duque ignored the Black Dragon Princess' protests and carried her off the boat. Makarov was immortal after all, and didn't know the Black Dragon Princess' identity. He was only surprised at his master's impatient behavior. Wasn't this almost like forcing himself on her? He knew very well that Duque wasn't that kind of person. What was Duque doing? Chapter 11:15. But no matter what, Makarov had to be on the same side as Duque. Suppressing his doubts, he held onto the bow of the boat and allowed Duque to board. Yet his behavior had evoked another thought in the Princess of the Black Dragon, that Duque was doing this on purpose. Then the question was, why would Duque do this to her? In the next second, the Princess of the Black Dragon thought she understood everything. Duque wants me to lose my composure so that he can gain the upper hand in the upcoming negotiations. Hehe. If I were a real noble lady, I would not have such boldness. But who am I? I am the Queen of the Black Dragon, Xianxia. The Princess of the Black Dragon had made up her mind. If Duque did anything out of line, she would activate the powerful magical instrument she had prepared long ago and teach Duque an unforgettable lesson. She didn't struggle and just let herself be hugged by Duque. His deep black eyes seemed to be able to shoot out dragon fang blades, piercing through Duque's heart. Unfortunately, her stubbornness and resistance only lasted for a second. When Duque carried her off the boat, his hand seemed to have slipped. Because of his stature and the length of his arms, Duque's right hand seemed to have stretched forward a little. 3 fingers poked the side of the dragon peak on the right. It's soft. Ah. This time, Xianxia finally let out a very feminine exclamation. Disembarking from the boat, the gentlemanly Duque, who looked like an honest and reliable young man, turned around and asked with concern, "What's wrong?" "On purpose? On purpose?" Staring at Duque's face that was separated from his facial muscles by the system elf, Xianxia was confused. She could only grit her teeth and said angrily, "It's nothing." Sit down, I'm about to set sail." Xianxia gently sat on the red velvet sofa at the bow of the ship with one hand leaning on the side of the ship made of crystal. Xianxia held her cheeks in her hands and there was still anger on her face, but her mind had already spread out. Compared to the dark cave in Dustwallow Swamp, which only had lava, flames and pillars, human inventions were much more luxurious and classy. Although she was a dragon, it didn't mean that she didn't like those shiny things. Sitting on this dazzling crystal ship, she felt an indescribable sense of happiness even though she thought she had seen many things. Especially when the boat left the dock and was exposed to the lake, this feeling was even stronger. The lover's boat for the commoners was wrapped in silver like iron. But without comparison there would be no Shanghai. Because the second gear of the lover's boat was directly wrapped in very thin silver, it was even more shiny. However, Duque's boat had a crystal shell. Under the moonlight and the fire on the shore as well as the magic lights on Lover's Island, the visual effect was even more stunning than the descent of the moon goddess. On the surface of the lake, countless envious and hateful gazes were cast over, which made Xianxia's vanity suddenly soar. This feeling is not bad. All of this was thought up by this very innovative human in front of me. Should I capture this guy in the future, enslave him and then force him to specially design the decoration of my dragon cave? Of course, Duque didn't know that Xianxia was such a black dragon. He only knew that this female black dragon was very creative and very human. Faced with the sudden gaze, Duque almost thought that he had been exposed, and was ready to shoot an arrow through the clouds, and thousands of soldiers and horses will come to meet. Unexpectedly, the black-haired humanoid black dragon princess glanced over with her slightly phoenix-like eyes. "Your creativity is not bad, I like it very much." Well, phoenix-like eyes were just a description. These were clearly dragon eyes, okay? That was domineering as if she wanted to collect all the beauty in the world into her own treasure vault. Faced with the black dragon princess's burning gaze, Duque put down the oars on his hands and bowed slightly. "My little invention, if it makes you happy, I'm very honored." The waterway from the dock to Lover's Island was less than 200 meters. Every boat had a number that corresponded to a waterway on the island. The waterway specially prepared for the Black Dragon Princess naturally had a beautiful entrance. The 7-foot-tall red coral was like a huge red fan, standing right above the entrance of the waterway. 12-foot-tall white crystal pillars stood on both sides of the waterway entrance. This red and white combination immediately made the waterway entrance look extremely high-end and classy. As soon as they entered the waterway, they could see that the walls of the 2-meter semicircle were full of gorgeous murals. It was a super long mural depicting the beautiful water world. Every part of the mural that involved stone, coral, and crystal must have been inlaid with the real thing. The real curves, together with the beautiful music that seemed to play automatically after entering the cave, made people feel like they were in a dreamy fairy tale world. How did you draw this mural? It seems like this lover's island was only built a few days ago, right? Even Xianxia, who thought she was experienced and knowledgeable, was deeply shocked. I drew it. With a snap of Duque's fingers, a few hands of magic appeared out of thin air. They took out a few brushes from the portal bag and sketched a few times in the air. A trace of greed flashed in Xianxia's eyes. She was more and more determined to capture Duque and make him a craftsman. At this moment there was a sudden commotion outside. Demons! Demons! Accompanied by screams and screams, an alarm suddenly rang by the lake. What's going on? Frowning, Duque immediately activated the magic transmission. In the air above the waterway, an illusory figure emerged. It was a male court mage. Xianxia recognized him as Druid's. This guy was a conservative on the surface, but in fact he was a dragonoid mage under her command. As a precaution, she secretly arranged for him to be in charge of the security of Lover's Island today. Sorry, Grand Duke Marcus, a bastard registered warlock did not inform us in advance and summoned his succubus on Lover's Island. He wanted to have sex with his succubus, and triggered the demonic alarm of the magic circle. Xianxia almost spat out. What the hell was this? She knew that warlocks who played with evil powers and enslaved demons had never been well liked by the public. Even if the mages and priests had reconciled with the warlocks during the Dalajan War 5 years ago, it did not mean that warlocks had become popular. It wasn't unusual for a warlock that nobody liked to do something with his beautiful succubus. But it just had to happen at this time. This was really... Duque was not in a good mood. Teach that guy a lesson according to the rules and then send him away. After checking Lover's Island, appease the people. If you want to continue, continue. If you don't want to, pay twice the fare. Understood. Druids bowed deeply. At the same time he secretly made a gesture that only Xianxia could understand. Safe. Chapter 11:16. Safety Awareness. This was a must. Xianxia would never forget how her father had died. Although she hated her father and her own birth, after all, it was her father who raped her mother Sinestra, that gave birth to her and Nefarian. This was because her mother was the strongest and did not die even after soaking in acid. However, she had to admit that Nesario as a dragon was definitely worthy of the title of a powerhouse. If it wasn't for this cunning human in front of her ruthlessly plotting against Nesario, allowing the 4 dragon kings to turn the tables and kill her father, it would probably still be the situation where the black dragons dominated the 5 major dragon clans. The death of Nesario, who she almost regarded as an enemy, also gave her a rare freedom. She could no longer be bullied by her father and be forced to do this and that like a slave. Of course, this did not mean that she had to be grateful to Duque. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. This was only based on the fact that the enemy still existed. If the common enemy was gone, what about the relationship? Of course it was her, the great black dragon queen, who had the final say. Gently waving her fan, Xianxia even had the time to look around. This was a very shallow waterway. The water was probably only knee-deep, but the surrounding decorations were really beautiful. In addition to beautiful corals and crystals, there were all kinds of pearls and even rare orbs of justice, and pieces of large magic light fragments. These were expensive materials that should have been used as high-level enchantments, but they were used as decorations. This kind of gorgeous and explosive decoration was very much to Xianxia's taste. All right, Duke Marcus, don't mention the word state. We're all smart people. What conditions do you have? The Black Dragon Princess, who thought that she had everything under control, threw out the words directly. She was waiting to see how Duque would respond. But there was a mysterious look on Duque's face. I don't want to use such a lousy excuse like a date. It makes me seem like a fool who can't move his legs when he sees a beautiful woman. But I really can't think of a better excuse for me to get close to you. Heh. Is that so? I'm actually a little disappointed. Xianxia smiled as she shifted her legs. Tonight she was wearing a long dress with a red base and black lace. Paired with the black lace suspender stockings that were invented and spread by a certain dude 15 years ago, she was as sexy as she could be. It was hard to tell when she was wearing formal clothes, but Xianxia was obviously the kind of perfect body that showed off her thinness and flesh. When she deliberately leaned against the red chair on the boat and crossed her legs, that absolute territory, that Dragon Valley, really stimulated Duze. Of course, Duque knew that she was deliberately showing off her femininity. Unfortunately, when he thought of her sharp fangs and how she could casually skewer him with just one of her dragon fingers, Duke shuddered. The beauty in front of him suddenly became dull and tasteless to him. All right. What are the conditions? Xianxia was a little disappointed that her great seduction technique didn't seem to be good enough, but it was just a little. The condition is, do you know what fear is? Suddenly, without any warning, a vivid image appeared in Xianxia's mind. The world was chaotic. She struggled hard to break through this suffocating world. How long did she knock? He forgot. Anyway, when she finally succeeded in breaking the damn eggshell, the scarred black behemoth that appeared in front of her made Xianxia fall into the deepest shock. It was a terrifying exotic beast that was pitch black in color. On its jagged skin layer that resembled a lizard's, there was a pair of pale-colored metallic horns that alternated between gray and white. On the bat-like black wings supported by bone, almost every key part had a huge, spiky horn, sharp and hard, full of violent beauty. What made her feel even more horrified was that the behemoth in front of her was covered with scars. On the shoulders, chest, abdomen, between the crisscrossed huge scratches, there were also traces of bone-deep corrosion. Those scars seemed to be from a long time ago, but even after such a long time she could still feel the horror at that time. How could the behemoth in front of her survive such heavy injuries? Its thick and powerful tail with several spikes scratched the rugged reddish-black rock layer, making a sharp sound. It was coldly looking at her as she crawled out of the eggshell. The gaze wasn't just judging, it was clear to the point of almost materializing hatred and disgust. Xianxia shuddered. But when she raised her head, a familiar, intimate and terrifying feeling of absurdity welled up in her heart, causing her to shout out the first sentence in her life. No, it wasn't a sentence, it was a name. Xylo. Translated into the common language, it was Xianxia. That was her mother's name. The behemoth. No, her mother. Xianxia shuddered. Then she felt an even deeper disgust. She opened her huge mouth and let out a sulphurous breath, and the disgust in her vertical pupils deepened. Damn it, I only had 2 eggs with that bastard, and they're both true dragons with inheritance. The descendants of 2 colossal dragons were not necessarily true colossal dragons. Only the descendants who inherited their parents' wisdom could grow into dragons like their parents. Many times there would be all kinds of mutations, such as the eggs hatched being dragon men, half-dragon men, or even dragon beasts that pure-blooded dragons looked down upon. These inferior creatures were destined to have a low status in the dragon race. But from the sound of it, Xianxia would have preferred to give birth to such scum. Soon, Xianxia understood how her father forced her mother to give birth to her and her brother. It was a tragic childhood, a past that she couldn't bear to look back on. But why would she think of this now? Suddenly, a sharp pain interrupted her memories. By the time she regained her senses, a glittering divine artifact longsword had already pierced through her chest from behind. She immediately realized who had done it. Duke Marcus. Her deafening roar made the entire Lover's Island tremble. The sound waves were so astonishing that even the people far away at the edge of the Mirror Lake could clearly hear it. The conservative nobles were dumbfounded. That's Countess Anristo's voice? How could it be so terrifying? Yes, terrifying. Angry. Violent. With endless murderous intent. Xianxia finally realized that she had fallen into a trap. Just like how Duque saw through her father's transformation spell, he saw through her now. The next moment, more than 100 portals suddenly opened around Lover's Island, and more than 10 powerful auras appeared. Chapter 11-17. This year's Valentine's Day, as one of the continuous events of the Alliance's 20th anniversary, was especially grand. In addition to the nobles who had their own appointments, Stormwind also organized a grand Valentine's Day ball in Stormwind's stronghold for couples to show off their love, as well as a chance for singles. Since the leaders of the conservatives and reformists had gone on a private date, this time, there was no such thing as a party for each faction. With the expectation of peace talks and the neutral knight faction's efforts, the overall atmosphere was quite good. Although the theme was Valentine's Day, there were fully armed knights performing war operas everywhere. This was a chaotic world. The continuous wars had long changed people's views, and the status of warriors and professionals had been infinitely improved. Almost every ignorant girl under the influence of knight novels and government propaganda longed for their man to be a great man who could protect them. Therefore war operas were very popular. There was also such a large-scale stage near Countess Anne Ristow's manor. It was about the warriors of Stormwind bravely fighting against the evil Nagas who had been brainwashed by the Burning Legion in Azhara. Of course, the Nagas were played by male Nagas belonging to Stormwind. In Stormwind's stronghold, when the atmosphere was at its peak, Bolvar suddenly stood on the high platform, and under the spotlight of the magic lamps, clapped his hands and asked everyone to be silent. Now, please allow me to put on a Valentine's Day special for everyone. Valentine's Day special? Even Bolvar, who was always serious, was enlightened. The nobles were very curious. In the next second, an uproar rose among the crowd of nobles. Because in the huge magic mirror that was 10 meters by 10 meters, it was Duque and Countess Katrana who were rowing the boat. Ha! Is Duke for Dragon going to show us a live show? Some of the nobles burst into laughter. When everyone saw the beautiful countess adjusting her legs and almost revealing her absolute domain, the atmosphere of the scene instantly reached its peak. No one knew what Bolivar was doing with this live broadcast, but everyone's gossipy hearts were burning fiercely. Could it be that after signing the peace treaty, the two sides would immediately get married because of a political deal? Some young nobles even began to whistle. In the next moment the scene changed. Duque suddenly said, "Do you know what fear is?" In the ballroom of Storm Fortress, every noble felt that something was wrong. No one knew what Duque did to Countess Katrana. They only felt that the countess' face was blank for a very short period of time, not even half a second. In the next scene, Duque flashed behind the countess and pierced her beautiful chest with a slender golden sword. Ah! The noblewomen screamed. What is that bastard Duque doing? The male nobles roared. Not to mention the conservatives, even the knights clenched their fists and glared at Bolvar. In every eye was the same question, the same angry reproach. What do you mean, Bolivar? At a time like this, you want us to watch a despicable murder and a political coup? Past. This was definitely going overboard. Only the most despicable of nobles would resort to such underhanded methods as murder. Damn it! We were wrong about Duke Marcus. What great hero of the Alliance. He was a despicable person through and through. After losing in a political battle, he did not even dare to rebel. Instead, he used such a despicable method to murder his political enemy, and a beautiful woman at that. Originally, an angry storm was gathering, and if it were to accumulate for a few more seconds, an angry volcano would erupt in the ballroom of Storm Fortress. But at this moment, the scene suddenly changed. Countess Katrana Anne Ristow, who was incomparably beautiful in the eyes of countless people, actually began to transform in the next moment. That beautiful face suddenly turned into a terrifying black lizard's face that was full of horny bumps. That pair of beautiful smooth arms that always maintained a graceful arc suddenly turned into giant claws that were terrifyingly strong. Behind that seductive backless dress, a pair of huge bat wings that seemed to be able to burst open a cave had appeared out of nowhere. Duke Marcus, that was the roar of an injured giant beast. That was also the roar of the countess, who was perfect in their eyes. This was not only heard from the magic mirror, but also from the side of the mirror lake, which was at least 5 to 6 kilometers away from here. It was the same voice. Not only them but the entire Stormwind city heard this extremely terrifying roar. Bolvar had already put on half of his armor, and his servant beside him was helping him put on his pauldrons. He slammed a heavy two-handed sword into the ground and shouted, "Everyone listen up. Onyxia, the princess of the Black Dragon, has disguised herself as Countess Katrana Anne Ristow and infiltrated the kingdom with the intention of subverting Stormwind, and even the entire alliance. The great regent Duke Marcus has led various strong men to besiege her. All subjects loyal to Stormwind, loyal to His Majesty Rin, listen up. Immediately arrest all of the Countess conspirators. Kill all of Countess Anne Ristow's guards and servants. They are all dragon men." What? Screams, slaps, and the clanging of weapons could be heard. This was no longer the peaceful era of 20 years ago. Even if it was a large ball, at least the swords of the knights would be placed on the sword rack at the edge of the ball. With Bolvar's command, even the knights who had not received the slightest news immediately turned around and rushed to the sword rack to retrieve their weapons. On the other side, realizing that the matter had been exposed, more than 10 people disguised as low-level nobles began to attack. They suddenly turned back into tall dragon men and half-dragons, and with a wave of their claws, they indeed killed many of the nobles around them. Unfortunately, most of them were conservative people. Seeing the nobles who had been chatting with them moments ago turn into dragon men, and even cut their companions into pieces, the nobles could not help but scream. Ah, 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 ah. All the doors of the ballroom suddenly opened, and a few elite squads led by holy knights rushed in from all directions, charging towards the few dragon men. A moment ago it was a warm and romantic ballroom, and the next moment, it had become a slaughterhouse. After taking care of a giant dragon man that was at least 4 meters tall, Bolvar finally understood Duque's good intentions. A mere dozen or so dragon men had already caused chaos in Fort Storm. If Xianxia, who was in charge, was still here, Fort Storm would probably have to be rebuilt again, and who knew how many people would die. Chapter 11:18. Outside the manor of the Countess of Enristo, the knights who had been performing an opera just a moment ago had suddenly become real. The audience saw the soldiers who had been singing loudly on the stage a second ago, and then immediately charged into Enristo Manor the moment they heard the commotion. They were all dumbfounded. Although a civil official immediately ran out to announce the Countess' crimes, the crowd only dispersed in shock after a series of inhuman roars and sounds of battle. Kill. Leave no one alive in the manor. Don't hold back. Even if it looks like a young girl, it could be a dragon. Surrender is only allowed under the premise of absolute safety, and use the enchanted long sword, Dragonslayer, to test its true form. Reginald Windsor did not know that in the original history, the day he exposed Xianxia's plot would be the day of his death. He would be killed by the Black Dragon Princess, and even Bolvar would not be able to save him. History had changed once again. Behind him, there was an endless stream of elite infantry, elite professionals, and half of the mechanized dwarven division. However, no matter how perfect Duque and Bolvar's ambush plan was, there were still mistakes. Many draconians had already washed away their countess status, and turned into ordinary humans to hide in various parts of Stormwind City. The officials had already opened the broadcast to announce this matter. Unfortunately, in order to keep it a secret, it was impossible to inform the patrols. When the draconians who looked no different from ordinary humans suddenly transformed and attacked, there were still many casualties in many places. Standing on the southern balcony of the Storm Fortress, looking at the light in the direction of Mirror Lake in the distance, Bolvar held his head and deeply blamed himself. It's all my fault. I actually let so many evil beings into the core of the kingdom. No matter what, everyone's focus was still on Lover's Island in Mirror Lake. There the powerhouses of the Alliance in the Horde gathered. Kane, Grom, Varrock, and Wajin, the 4 Horde powerhouses, followed Jaina through the teleportation gate. Among the warriors of the Alliance, there were the Rogosh version of Varian and the Bronzebeard brothers from Ironforge. The remaining 4 of the 5 Silver Saints, Turalian, Sidon, Tyrion, and Gavin Radzi, along with Mograine, Abendis, and Riadaline, were the strongest paladins in the world. The thieves consisted of the Van Cleef father and daughter, Gavalilla. The ranged attackers were the 4 Windrunner sisters. The mages were Duque, Jaina, Ronan, Elucia, Solarian, Gina Goldsword, and Master Craftsman Jurbin. There were no warlocks, and the priests were Tyrande, Benedicta, Sally Matwin, and Kalia. The druid is Brawl. This time, other than Lilith and him who were variables in history, the others were standard Hall of Famers. Duque had spent a lot of effort to form a 30-man team from the Hall of Fame, not just to beat Xianxia away. He wanted to capture Xianxia. No matter how bad it was, he wanted to get rid of her. Of course, they had to capture him to save William. However, if they couldn't capture him and the goddess of fate wasn't on their side, they would have to kill him if the historical event of the 2 Williams merging into one didn't happen. Duque wouldn't let Xianxia go back to her lair no matter what. Her lair was in the Dustwallow Swamp, which could threaten Theramore and directly affect the wood and mineral trade between the Alliance and the Horde. This was why the Horde was willing to send the 4 beasts to help after Duque explained the situation to Thrall. Of course, Grom was very happy to finally have a chance to return the favor. After all, Duque had said that if he helped out, the favor between him and Grom would be cancelled. In addition, Cudrin Wildhammer had also pulled 2,000 Griffin Knights and 3 Dalajan high-grade mage teams to set up a magic formation outside the perimeter to hold the line. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that this was an inescapable trap. Hearing the terrifying dragon roar on Lover's Island, Gavin Rad whistled. Why does the black dragon always like to run into the Alliance? The old one is dead and the young one is here to deliver food? Why don't you think about the Horde? Woken rolled his eyes at Gavin Rad. Gavin Rad, don't be careless. Thean rolled his eyes at Gavin Rad. Yes, yes, yes. Gavin Rad promised. In fact, only Thean, who was also one of the 5 Silver Saints and was older, could suppress him. After all, his status was there. However, he didn't stop talking. Speaking of which, Boss Duque personally set up an ambush. There's no one who can escape on their own, right? And Arthas. Mograine clenched the Ashbringer in his hand. Eat the bread 1 bite at a time. Alessandro. Abendis laughed. Focus on what's in front of you. Everyone, the time is ripe. Duque will lead us on an expedition to Northrend. The one who spoke was Queen Kalia. Although the powerhouses of Rotterdam didn't want to see their queen go to the front lines, Kalia's words, "Are you looking down on Sylvanas, Jaina and Alucia?" choked them to death. They all knew about the relationship between their queen and Duque. They could only lament that the women of the Duque family were all arrogant and leading them astray. Speaking of which, Kalia wasn't weak. Just based on the power of holy light, she was definitely at the level of a regional bishop. They could only let her participate in the battle. At this time, under the spells of the mages on the periphery, the not-too-big mirror lake began to freeze. Relying on the spiked shoes that had been prepared in advance, every powerhouse could easily stand on the ice. Duque's figure appeared. "I've injured her, but it's not enough. Everyone prepare for the second stage." As soon as Duque's voice fell, an even more furious roar of the giant dragon sounded. A ball of flames that seemed to have come from a fiery purgatory suddenly spewed out from every channel. Even though the powerhouses had already maintained a safe distance, they were still a little speechless. The artificial outer shell of Lover's Island exploded under the dragon's breath, but there were no splashes of debris. Instead, all the crystals and corals that were blown into the air showed a strange stagnation. Duque waved his hands and his entire body shone with arcane light. He and Ronan cast a spell together, clearing away the stagnant debris in the air, revealing the true appearance of the things hidden in the outer shell of Lover's Island. They were 108 huge crystal prisms that had long been polished to an incomparably sharp level. Each of them was as tall as a 2-story building, and was enough to be the pillars of a house. However, at this moment they were more like giant bolts that had been shot out by lightning. On their sharp tips, they emitted a frightening enchantment light. That was a special enchantment that had not appeared in history, taken apart from the famous Floor's dragon slaying technique outline. It was dragon slaying. Chapter 11-19. At the mention of Feeler's dragon slaying technique, perhaps many veteran players would smile knowingly as they reminisced about it. Back in the day, many poor hunters relied on this thing to make a fortune, turning from a poor wretch into a rich tycoon overnight. It was all because they obtained this book from the Mallet of Misfortune. 10,000 years ago, the High Elves were the most courageous race to challenge the taboo, and they even developed a whole set of techniques to deal with giant dragons. Of course, it was not aimed at the dragons under the Sleeping Dragon Temple, but at the wild dragons and dragon subspecies that had wandered outside. That Feeler's dragon slaying technique was a collection of all dragon slaying techniques. It was rare for Duque to make a trip to the Mallet of Misfortune, so how could he not bring this thing back? With Duque's clear guidance, the father and daughter duo painfully flipped through thousands of dusty books before they easily found their target. The dragon slaying technique would naturally trigger a chain quest, which then turned into the unquenched ancient blade in Abendis's hands. As long as he threw it at the Black Dragon Princess before she died, she would spit out a mouthful of dragon breath. After the Black Dragon Princess died, he would return with the unquenched ancient blade, and turn in the quest. Then it would become the famous defensive sword, Quell, Thalar. Although this sword looked like a huge machete used by the Celestial Empire to slay devils, it couldn't be helped if it was called a sword. It was like a certain island country calling a katana a sword. Ignoring the fact that this dragon-slaying sword could only be used to show off, Duque's biggest discovery was an enchantment formula that had never been discovered by players. Dragon slaying. Similar to Demon Slayer, this kind of enchantment specifically targeted dragons could increase the damage of weapons against dragons by 10% to 20%. So, as long as it was used well, even an ordinary weapon could become a killing machine. A moment ago, Onyxia could not sense any danger. Of course, this was because Duque had not completed the enchantment. Just as the plan was revealed, Duque not only stabbed the Black Dragon Princess in the back with his godly sword, but also enchanted the crystal pillars with Magician's hand. Enchantment was a superb technique that used magical materials to add special effects to all kinds of equipment. However, with the help of the system elves that could use magical power to the last 10 decimal places, Duque didn't even need to do it himself. He could instantly turn those seemingly harmless enchantment materials into enchantments that specifically targeted the dragon race. After blowing up most of Lover's Island, the sharp crystal prism fell with a loud crash. Roar. Following Onyxia's furious roar, a strange magical shield appeared above her huge black figure at lightning speed. Bang bang bang. That's right. Unexpectedly, the magic shield blocked more than 80% of the prisms, but there were still nearly 30 prisms that shot towards Onyxia. The Black Dragon Princess was frightened out of her wits. The dragon wings flapped, the dragon claws and the dragon tail swept, and the 5 prisms still pierced through her body after she used all her skills. Roar. It was an angry roar. It was also the cry of a trapped beast. She really wanted to flap her wings and fly away from this death trap on the spot, but just as she flapped her wings, she was shocked to find that the exploded Lover's Island still had a hemispherical frame, like a cage tightly covering her huge body. This is... The glistening yellow pupils suddenly focused on the man. Duque stood against the wind and smiled. A gift from the Dragon Sleep Temple, do you like it? Onyxia's huge black dragon body was trembling. Another trap. A trap that was even tighter than the one that killed her father, Nisario. From the failure of the political struggle, to the excuse of a date to lure her out of Stormwind City, and finally to the so-called Lover's Island, it was all a trap. She didn't expect that she would be trapped by such a chain of tricks and become a trapped beast in a cage. Do you think such a toy can trap me? Onyxia angrily snorted at Duque with her sulfur-smelling breath. Unfortunately, it was too far away and it was more like some kind of demonstration. If no one interferes, you might be able to break free. Duque curled his lips. What if there was a group of powerhouses interfering? A large group of powerhouses from the Alliance and the Horde, and even a few unruly fellows, chuckled as they approached Onyxia from both sides in small teams. The Ox-Head Chieftain, Kane, even patted the thick plate armor on his chest that had a clear frost aura. He carried the huge totem pole and strode forward with his head held high. Duke Marcus, you puny mortals actually dare to attack me? You have to understand your position, mortals, Onyxia snarled. Duque laughed shamelessly. That's not very convincing for you who has blood spurting out of your chest. He had never had the chance to figure out whether there was an inevitable connection between a dragon in human form and its original body in dragon form, but now he had figured it out. There was. Right in the middle of the black dragon's back and chest, the black dragon scales that covered the solid dragon body had disappeared, and a wound about the size of a wine barrel was gurgling with dragon blood. It corresponded to the sword wound. Did that mean that a dragon in human form was easy to kill? The answer was of course no. When Duque ambushed her, he clearly felt the rebound from his hand. If Onyxia hadn't been hit by his mind blast, and he was using a divine artifact, it wouldn't have been so easy to pierce through her body. Obviously, even in human form, Onyxia's defense was still at the level of a dragon. If he made a mistake, even if he used an epic-ranked axe to chop at her seemingly delicate neck in human form, the axe would still be bounced off. But so far everything was going smoothly. Bastard. Onyxia suddenly broke free from the crystal prism that pierced through her dragon wings and suddenly pounced at Duque, opening her dragon mouth that was full of fangs. Yo, are you going to tell us that you usually have to leave your nest to find food? Duque mocked. In all honesty, Onyxia really wanted to say that, but Duque actually interrupted her. She became even angrier. Unknowingly, her momentum became fiercer. Who knew that in the next moment, Duque would disappear in front of her just like that? When she realized that it was actually Duque's illusion, a huge tauren had already come up to her. Come on, little lizard. Let your big brother ox play with you. The thick totem pole, which was as tall as a building, swept over unreasonably. The old ox in history was not as awesome as he was now. Because of a certain someone, Cain, who accidentally participated in the Battle of Mount Hygel in advance and split the spoils, was covered in gorgeous equipment. For him, the almost doubled strength value was like adding wings to a tiger. As the pillar went down, Onyxia felt as if she had returned to her childhood. That time she was so funny that she bumped into a mountain. Just like the last time, 2 of her dragon teeth were broken. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.